right, all right. I think we've got the streams open. Let me double check here before we get too far ahead of ourselves. The YouTube stream should be up and rocking and rolling, and the YouTube guest box is open. Once again, I'm streaming on the road, so I don't have access to a Windows PC where I can dual stream properly to TikTok and take TikTok guests. So we're only going to be taking guests this week at least. Next week I'll be back home. Only taking guests tonight using the link provided, tinyurl.com/guest DZ. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch, it's in the description of the video. You'll be able to click on the link and you'll be able to get into the guest box. Also, welcome in, friends. It's Wednesday night, so thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you coming for the late showing. Sorry, I'm kind of working late this week, but welcome in, everyone. Marceline, Autumn, good to see you guys. Also, we've got a bunch of people piling in on the YouTube streams. Welcome in, friends. And I think we got a couple super chats already, and a new member to the Kraken Crew Elite, KR Young. Welcome to the Kraken Crew Elite, Big W. And make sure and grab the link to the cheat sheet now that you're in the Kraken Crew. And also, Dexter with us tonight. Good to see you, Dexter. Thank you so much for sending out 5 DZ subbies right off the rip. Big W. Very generous. So good to see you tonight, Dex. And Spencer, thank you for the $2 super chat. Spencer says, Doug says thank you for Lichen and Sharon. What? Wait, is Lichen? Wait, thank you for Lichen and Sharon. Oh, liking and Sharon? Am I? I think you're making a play on words that may have gone over my head, but I think I see what you're I'm picking up what you're dropping. I'm picking up what you're laying down. There we go. Anyway, Spencer, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. And the guest box is open. Looks like everyone. Joycey says Lycian or Lycian. Is that something I should know about? See, now I got to look it up. Hold on. Let's see. It looks like it is a form of algae. Okay, so maybe I don't know what's happening here. Interesting. Okay, all right, okay. Of course, it could have been typo for lichen. I could be wrong. It's hard to say. It's hard to say sometimes. I've sent quite a few mistyped super chats, that's for sure. And Timothy says, kitchen gonna start getting steamy. That's what's about to happen. Put the smoke detectors away. There's gonna be fire. And Tales of the Levant, good to see you tonight. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Says, is the Pigeon Bible translation approved by Doug? I don't even know that translation. Holy shit, that's the Pigeon? Hold on, B-I. This is weird. The Pigeon Bible translation. Interesting. Is this a Hawaiian? You know, the native speech of about half of those who brought up in Hawaii. I had no idea that there was a specific Bible translation dedicated to the native Hawaiian language. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about it. I can't read native Hawaiian, so I certainly wouldn't have much to add to whether or not it's a good translation. I would say this: if that's your native tongue, that's probably what you should be reading. Just putting that out there. Not that every Bible translation is necessarily good. We've seen bad ones before. We've seen them on the stream, but if it's in your tongue, you're more likely to understand it. So I would go for that. And mostly Gizzards, great to see you tonight. Thank you for the 666. Hail Nero, he says, let's fucking go, Justin. And I say, we are going, Gizzards. We are absolutely going. And we agree with you as well, Megs. Let's go. We're absolutely going. We're locked and loaded. And we are about ready to bring in our first guest. I don't want to get buried in super chats just yet. Let me clear the board. Adam says, me love you long I appreciate that, Adam. And tell Small Johnson I said hello. And Rouge, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, "Hey Justin, have you ever read about the Aboriginal Dreamtime oral traditions? Any thoughts?" I have not. Unfortunately, I got to do a little bit of sociology when I was in college, and that was about it. I just did like the minimum requirements. I can't say that I've been able to study a lot of Aboriginal culture or anything of that nature, but it certainly would be interesting. If you have resources, send them my way. I'd love to learn about them. And Texas Panhandler, great to see you tonight. Thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Says, "Yo, Justin, glad to catch the stream at the start tonight." Praise Doug. Well, I'm glad you're here, Texas. And we started late, but we're going to cook nonetheless. The oven is already preheated to 350. We're going to put the bundt cake in. And Pat, my friend, good to see you. So let's get cooking. What's happening, Justin? Well, right now, Pat, we're just grabbing a couple super chats, and we're going to bring in our first guest from our queue. And Gizzards, thank you so much for sending out 5 DZ memberships. That's very generous. Greatly appreciated. And Johanna's with us as well. Good to see you, friend. Says, "I don't understand why believers always say that God is love, yet they practice so much hate and teach their children to hate as well." It's the craziest thing. It's because people say things without thinking. That's the reality of it. These are platitudes, right? Platitudes are easy to say and they're difficult to do, which is why we see so many of them. That's my take on it. And Space Lord, good to see you, friend. Thank you for the super chat. Says, "Trying to stay awake till bedtime after eating too much at a Mexican restaurant. I ain't hungry, but let's cook." Listen, I get it. I've been there. You got to pace yourself. You can't just go hog wild. That's how you get over full. They give you huge portions at these restaurants. So you gotta go in easy, or else you end up eating 15 chimichangas and you can't sleep all night. Hannibal's mom, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, "Scientists recorded the sound of 2 helium atoms laughing." That's good. I like the table of elements joke. Greatly appreciated. Big W science jokes. And Big W as well, Johanna, for sending out 5 DZ memberships. Big W, super generous. Greatly appreciate it. Big W. And Master Macheteer, thank you so much. Oops, I got double super chats. Thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Big W says, "How much do you know about Jehovah's Witnesses beliefs and how they differ from mainstream? They come by often, and I'd love to chat with them from a place of knowledge." Well, the JWs, so the problem is the JWs aren't, I don't want to say that they're so culty that they're not Christian. They have a couple weird belief systems. So like they're really into this end times, like Jesus coming back soon. And for a while they were like, well, only the 144,000 chosen are going to come back or enter. It was a big to do. But I'm trying to think if there's something in particular about the JWs that really sets them apart. I can't say that there's anything huge for me. I personally had such a broad umbrella of Christianity when I was in it that I guess I just never thought of them as being a cult. I thought they were just another denomination, and I still do, of Christianity. They're reading the book a little bit differently than others. Like they're totally okay with the divine council and typically being multiple tiers of God. They're usually accepting of henotheism, but they've got a lot of weird outlandish beliefs about how they interpret the Bible. Like I don't know, DM me, send me a message on Discord. I'll send you like a bolded list of where they differ from typical mainstream Christians, because there's a couple weird things out there. And Germs, thank you for the 666. Hail Nero, Hail Satan, says, "My Oxford annotated NRSV version 5 arrives Friday. Big W. I'm going to spend a couple of nights with a cheat sheet and some post-it tabs in Texas. I get a lot of debates. I love to hear it. Listen, take the cheat sheet tab up that Bible, tab it all to hell, and then you're going to be ready. You'll be, when the sword drills are coming, you're going to be the most prepared of everybody. You're going to have everything ready to rock and roll. And Bar, good to see you. Thank you so much for the 666. Hail Nero says, I'd love to see you cook Jordan Peterson one day. I was disappointed they did not invite me to the Jordan Peterson verse 20 atheists. It is what it is. I think they're picking a lot of younger people because that's their demographic. That being said, hey, maybe in the future, maybe I'll get on Jubilee in the future. I'm trying. And Adele, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Great to see you tonight. It says simple and not confusing super chat to say, hey, and Doug bless us all. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And good to see and hear from you, Adele. And tell Rock Hard for Doug hello as well. And with that, let me grab our first guest. Welcome in, Justin. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. I suspect you can hear me, though. Let me see what's going on. It says you have a microphone. Interesting. Let me double check something. Make sure everything's set up properly. Although nothing's changed. But you know, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Yeah, I mean it should be maybe my audio is not turned on. Let me make sure my audio is turned on. Although I'm pretty sure it is. Can we get a friendly jump in the YouTube guest queue real quick? We'll double check it, make sure everything works before I suggest that maybe Justin's got some hardware issues. The other Justin. There's two Justins now, me and the guest. But yeah, for some reason it's not showing when you talked. It's not showing. There's no bars on your screen showing that you're talking. So I don't know if you selected the wrong hardware or what's going on with your equipment. Your connection's also really bad. Like it's super choppy, and you've got 3 red bars. So it might just be that your connection's so poor that the audio is not transmitting. That's certainly a possibility. I don't even see you on the screen, which is really interesting. I should see you on my screen right about now. Oh, hold on. There we go. Oh boy. Oh boy. All right. Well, he dropped, and I think he's reloading. So we'll give him a second here real quick and see if we can get this working. Of course, it could be my audio. All right, Rockin' River. 1 second. Let me see. What the situation is here. I literally didn't change anything. This is the craziest thing about my setup. I literally didn't change shit. Nothing's changed with my setup. Not a damn thing has changed with my setup. Literally all I did was restart my computer from the last time I used it, and now nothing works. All right, hold on, Rockin' River. I mean, everything should be set up and working. Rockin' River, if you're talking, I can't hear you. And I can't see you on the screen for some reason. What a weird situation. Let me just re-add this stupid link and see if that fixes it. I'm gonna add somebody else at the same time too. Oh, there we go. It added Justin this time to the screen. Justin, I don't know if I'll be able to hear you when you talk yet, though. For some reason, I'm not getting any audio over from. Hold on. What about now? No, I'm not getting audio from none of y'all. I can't hear Rock and I can't hear Justin. Neither one of y'all I can hear. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Yeah, I know. Yeah, everyone on TikTok saying you can't hear. Yeah, I know you can't hear. If I can't hear him, I don't think y'all can hear him. Although the question is why. I don't know why. I don't know why no one can hear. Either way, you know, these are the trials we face. We need to say a prayer to Doug, you know, and have Doug sort this out for us. And also, Michael, thank you so much for sending a $50 super thanks. Big W, Michael. I really appreciate that. That's super generous. All right, Justin's back again. See if we can get Justin back. All right, Justin, you're on the screen. I'm trying to see if the audio will pick you up, though. Yeah, Rockin' River says you're talking. No one can hear you, Rockin' River. I don't know why. I'm opening the audio settings. It says you have a microphone plugged in, Justin, but there is no audio being fed through. Let me just I'm going to restart my waiting room. Hold on. I don't know. It shouldn't matter. Shouldn't change anything. But just in case. Okay, I restarted the deconstruction waiting room. Let's see if that takes care of it. All right, we'll try it again now, Justin. Let's see if we can get anything. Of course not. I'm just going to join on my phone and see if it's your guys' equipment or my equipment. It's kind of silly. 1 second. Oh boy. All right. What's my name? Justin number 3. Okay. Join with camera. Yeah. Audio source. Let's see if this works. Okay. When I talk, oh, there we go. When I talk through this, I'm gonna add myself. It's crazy. Yeah. So my equipment works. I'm talking through my phone right now. I assume everyone can hear me talking through the phone into VideoNinja. So I suspect it works. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I can hear me. If y'all can hear me, yeah, the echo should be fixed. I had some stuff going on. Also, because this mic is going. So I've got 2 mics. Yeah, it's because I've got 2 microphones happening right now. But yeah, y'all can hear me. Okay. So the problem is with your all equipment, not with mine. Hold on. All right, let's see if this works. Germs, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, hold on. I can hear you. Can everyone else hear you? Can you introduce yourself, Germ?
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a friendly. I was just hopping in to help you test your equipment. So
I thought so. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So your equipment is working, right? So when you talk, I can hear you. When you talk, I think everyone else can hear you. So that means the problem must be on Justin's end, not this Justin, the other Justin.
The other Justin, yeah.
Was trying to get in here. Okay. I was like, I didn't change anything. This should just work.
No, I'm just on my AirPods and my MacBook, so it's working fine for me.
That's the craziest thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, I really appreciate you helping me sort this out just to make sure. I don't know what was going on with that guy's connection or hardware, but apparently it just wasn't up to snuff.
Well, while I'm here, I wanted to say thanks for all the content you do. I'm the one who just posted about the NRSV on his way.
I thought so. Listen, I appreciate you watching and supporting the channel, and I really hope that you enjoyed the NRSV. 5th edition is a really good edition, and I think what you'll discover is that, most of the academic study notes in this Bible are going to look roughly nothing like what most apologists are saying, because as it turns out, there's a reason there's a reason why there's not a lot of scholars doing apologist stuff, and it's obviously because the data doesn't agree. So
Yeah, I mean, I deconstructed when I was going to Baylor University, and the more I learned, the more I read the Bible, the more I was like, this is complete nonsense. This makes no sense.
oh yeah, that's the time to do it. That's the time to deconstruct. And Baylor, for the most part, is a pretty decent school. Like, you're going to get an adequate education there. So I'm not surprised that it ended in deconstruction.
Yep. All right, well, I'll hop off and let you get a guest in here if you want.
Hey, thanks so much. It's great to hear from you, man. And big W on deconstructing. It's not easy, but you did it. So big kudos to you.
All right, thanks.
Cheers, friend. Yeah, a big W for deconstructing on your own. It's not an easy feat. It's not something that like just happens. So yeah, big W. Especially, I would say though, while you're at school, that's when it's most likely to happen, because the goal in a lot of these higher educational institutions, they want to make you think about what you believe. They don't want you to believe it just because. I know that there are some educational institutions that disagree. They would love for you to believe it with no reason. But the good ones don't. If you go to like Liberty, yeah, they're going to engage in some goofy apologetics. Or if you go to like Bob Jones University, you're going to get goofy apologetics. But if you go to a real university or a real seminary, you're not going to get that apologetic nonsense. You might get a little bit of it at like Trinity. Trinity does a little bit of apologetics, but whatever. They're Reformed. What are you gonna do? When you're Reformed, you have to do apologetics because you have to justify this predestination garbage. Anyways, the guest box is open. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a link in the description. If you don't have access to the description of the video and you're watching on TikTok, there's a link up top you can use to join. It's a third-party app. You don't have to sign up for anything. I don't need your email. You don't have to make an account. It's tinyurl.com/guestdz. You can jump right into the conversation. And you can tell me how wrong I am. You can tell me all about your God and how your God is super, super real and 100% not imaginary. We'd love to hear about that. And Dr. Pizza, thank you so much for the super chat. Dr. Pizza says, I hope they put you in a good hotel. Traveling for work sucks. Praise tag. It's not my favorite thing. I enjoyed it when I was 20. I don't enjoy it as much at my current age. I'd rather just be home. But yes, they're taking care of me. I'm well taken care of on the road. I appreciate the sentiment, Dr. Pizza. If you are going to have to get stuck traveling for work, obviously you want to be in a decent hotel. All right, welcome back, Justin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, it works now. Your connection's kind of sloppy, but it works.
Yeah, I'm trying to get hooked up to Wi-Fi right now. It should be speeding up here in a sec.
So definitely hook into Wi-Fi.
Yeah, doing that now. Anyway, well, hello, Justin. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Justin? Are you
I'm good.
A believer?
I am not a believer. Freshly out of belief. Actually.
Well, I mean, welcome to rationality, friend.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was actually much thanks to your videos that has been the case. So yeah, it's been hard. It's been a rough go because my entire family is all very devout, but I just couldn't quite handle it anymore.
I get it. Yeah, I mean, my family's pretty devout as well. Although I would say they're pretty down to earth, and they didn't, I didn't get harassed or anything like that over it. But yeah, when all your family, they're all believers, then it's difficult to come out and be like, hey, I actually don't think that this all is adding up.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, well, it was funny because I started with my looking into the Old Testament, mainly because I was thinking about actually pursuing a career in religion. And about 2 months in of my research and reading the Old Testament and watching videos, and I was just like, man, all this sounds like garbage. This guy sounds like a monster. And yeah, the more I read, the more that was just rooted into reality. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's rough. It's horrible.
Certainly not
But
pleasant.
no, it's not pleasant at all, at all. And it's really funny when I hear like my wife and my family and her family mostly talk about God. I'm like, man, are we reading the same Bible? It doesn't make any sense.
You're definitely not reading the same Bible.
Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, I thought maybe it was a translation issue. So I read 2 different translations. Ended up with the NRSV, and because I heard that was the one that was used in seminary, so I figured, man, maybe I'm just misreading this stupid thing. But no, and then they say, well, you got to read the New Testament. I'm like, well, you don't have a New Testament without the Old, so you can't just skip steps here. We have to actually know who this God is. But no, a lot of the Christians that I hear now, they just want to hear about the New Testament. But I can't even believe the New Testament if the Old Testament is full of that garbage.
Well, yeah, I
Um,
mean, I agree with you. Like, full stop. If the Old Testament is full of nonsense, then I have no reason to believe what it says. Like,
exactly.
I don't care that the New Testament said a thing if the thing that it's based on is crazy.
True. Yeah. Then so the reason why I jumped on your live, not all me, obviously me and I agree on most things, so there's no point in really talking there. Because I know you have people to actually debate with, and that's good. But my question is what is on that cheat sheet? Because I was thinking about joining the subscription, but I wasn't sure what was on it.
There's a lot. I can read off the tabs. The first tab is labeled the worst bits. It's just all the worst parts of the Bible. The second tab are biblical contradictions, and I've got like 67 of them. The third tab is all on how the Apocrypha shows up in the New Testament, and then there's a link to an alternative document that shows every mention of the Apocryphal books by every church father for the first 400 years of the church. The fourth tab is scientific errors. The next is anachronisms. The next is all of the prophecies of Jesus in the Gospels with refutations. Although that's like only 90% filled out, I gotta give a couple more refutations. Another tab after that is a list of failed prophecies from the Old Testament. And then next is a tab full of refutations for the omni properties of God. The next tab after that is a list of like every known New Testament manuscript that is like before the 5th century, including a chart as their distribution in time. Then I got a tab on philosophy syllogisms against God. I've got a tab against flat Earth theory. Or I got a tab with all the flat Earth Bible verses. There's an appendix with a bunch of stuff in it. I mean, I got a timeline of the contradictions of the Passover. I've got 2 timelines of the empty tomb contradictions. I've got a tab dedicated to refuting the LDS claims. Another tab dedicated to every mention of hell inside and outside of the Bible in the relevant time periods. And that's about it.
Wow. Yeah, I think that would be definitely worth it. All right. And how do I subscribe to that to get access to that?
Yeah, just hit the join button and go to my YouTube page and hit the join button. The Kraken Crew, the first level will just get you like all the fun emotes. If not everybody wants the cheat sheet. The second level gets you the cheat sheet and the emotes, and there'll just be a link once you join up.
Sweet. All right. Well, cool, man. Well, I want to thank you for all you do because you help people like me who are making the wrong decision and we want to make the right one. So thank you.
Not a problem. Big W, Justin. Good to hear from you. And thanks so much for watching the channel.
Absolutely. Thank you. All
Cheers,
right,
friend. Big W for deconstructing. And, if I might add, had a nice name. And Germ, again, good to see you. Thank you for the super chat. It says, was nice chatting. Those talking about the Korean flag, my Korean soldiers signed it for me when I served over there in the army. Oh, wow. Interesting. I just had a conversation recently over the holiday with somebody who served in Korea. And we don't get to talk about the Korean War all that much. It doesn't really come up. I would love to actually meet some more people that were in the Korean War that could tell me about their experience, because I feel like you hear a little bit about Vietnam, you hear obviously about World War II, but no one really talks about the Korean War. But man, a lot of people were involved in the Korean War. And Marcus, thank you for the super chat, says, is there any way you could talk about the curse of Ham? I'm having trouble finding sources I trust to further understand it. So the curse of Ham is really simple. It shows up in Genesis chapter 9 when Ham does some sort of unspeakable thing to his father, theoretically. Now, my reading of the passage, in parallel with the fact that it was probably written around the same time as Leviticus, is that when it says he uncovered his father's nakedness, it actually is referring to sleeping with his mother. In Leviticus, it talks about how if you uncover the nakedness of a married woman, you actually uncover the nakedness of her husband. So if you uncover the nakedness of your mother, you actually uncover the nakedness of your father, because her nakedness is his nakedness. And you might ask yourself, why would he sleep with his own mother? I think this is very clear. He was trying to set a new social hierarchy now that everybody in the world was dead and it was just them. He was doing what Absalom did to his father. He slept with his father's wives. Same thing that Reuben did to his father. He slept with one of his father's wives. It's a power move, right? Now, that's my reading of the text. I think there's two layers to the story in Genesis 9. I think there's an older layer and a newer layer. I think the newer layer is there to make sense of the passage that didn't understand it in light of Leviticus. But that being said, the long and short of it is, I think that he had sex with his mother, which is why there was the curse. Ham was never cursed. In Genesis 9, it was actually his son Canaan who was cursed. You might ask yourself, well, why was Canaan cursed if, in fact, Ham committed the sin? Well, if, in fact, he slept with his mother and created offspring, then it would be presumed that the offspring of that incestuous union would be cursed, the same way the offspring of Lot and his two daughters were cursed. And so Ham gave birth to a terrible lineage of people, theoretically, that were cursed. And so this is the excuse for why they're allowed to genocide the Canaanite, theoretically. Now, you could say, well, listen, it sounds like whatever he did it to Noah, and you certainly could have that viewpoint. But then you have to come up with a reason why he cursed Canaan rather than Ham. Although we've seen quite a few times, like in Exodus 34:7, where God openly brags about visiting the iniquities of the father upon the children and the children's children. So certainly it's possible that God is like, well, Ham fucked up. I'll punish everybody from his lineage because of what Ham did. And that's perfectly in keeping with what Yahweh tends to do. There's nothing weird or out of step. But let me grab one or two more super chats. We got another guest in the box. Fix It. Welcome to the Kraken crew. Elite and Amir, good to see you, friend. Thank you for sending out a DZ gifted membership. And Alex, thank you so much for this. Oh, our guest just dropped. I guess he didn't want to talk. Alex, thank you for the super chat. It says, curious, might have Paul said not to follow the law since he thought the world was ending, given Jesus said it would end then, and he was coming back soon. So you're not wrong. In 1 Corinthians and in 1 Thessalonians, it's pretty clear that Paul is under the impression that the world is ending soon. In fact, he says, don't even marry. If you are married, live as though you're not married. And Jesus himself said in Matthew chapter 19 that it's better to be a eunuch for the sake of the gospel. So we definitely have this idea from the Bible that the world is about to end and you should dedicate everything to the gospel. But in accordance with the law, my understanding of Paul is that he probably wanted to get rid of the law because it was the greatest barrier to bringing in the Gentiles. If you're trying to bring Gentiles into the fold, what's going to be the biggest setback? Well, they're going to be like, I'm not going to follow these laws. This is crazy. Right. So my personal opinion, I think Paul was just trying to get rid of that hurdle and move the movement forward without that hurdle. And Origen agrees, actually, and some other early church fathers agree that Jesus was a Judaizer. It wasn't until later that there seems to be a movement to get rid of these laws. All right, let's get our guest in here. Looks like, is it David? David? David, did you accidentally request up? Hello? Hola? ¿Cómo está? No? Okay. All right. Well, David, if you figure out how technology works, come on back and we'll get you plugged into the conversation. And, love to talk to you. I'm going to drop you down now, though. I suspect it's because your connection's bad, too. People, friends, if you're if you're going to request up, just join the Wi-Fi network. Don't use your cell phone reception. It's not. I mean, you can do it that way, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you turn your video off. It really makes the connection laggy. His connection might actually work if he just turned his video off or he joined via Wi-Fi. Decal Den, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Says rereading the Bible, highlighting the problems just based on my own thoughts. Gonna need a lifetime supply of markers. Every page looks like a rainbow. Yeah. I mean, listen, the first time I did it, I had an atheist friend. I was still Christian and I was engaging in some minor apologetics. An atheist friend that says, Justin, like, you're starting with the opinion that the Bible is true, and then it's up for everybody else to disprove it. He goes, just be honest. Go to the beginning of the Bible, read it as though you're not already a Christian, and every time you read something that's weird or out of place, just ask yourself, does this make sense, and is it true? And I did, and it turns out there's a lot of stuff in there that I could only say that I believe it's true. I certainly couldn't prove that it's true. I have to take it on faith. And there's a lot of problems as well that you run into that as an apologist, you would make excuses for. But as a normal human being, you wouldn't. You wouldn't make excuses for slavery and rape and genocide and different things like that. All right. Welcome in, David. David. Okay. I don't know what's going on with David. Apparently he's having a party over there, but I don't think I'm going to let him have a party on my stream. Marcus, coming in with a $10 super chat. Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate that. Referring to Canaan again, it says, is the punishment for Canaan the darkening of his skin? I've interpreted it as a racist story, and I just want to make sure that's not the wrong reading. That, unfortunately, that is the wrong reading, Marcus. So the reason why people think that the curse of Ham specifically is to be dark is because when you look at the table of nations that come later, it seems as though Ham and his descendants go south. They descend into Africa. And then people later came and said, oh, well, Ham was cursed, and Ham is the source of all these dark people from Africa. Therefore, it's okay to enslave the Africans. That's where that whole nonsense is coming from. In reality, we know that's not the case. People came out of Africa and populated the rest of the world, not the other way around. They didn't start in, the ancient Near East, around Mount Ararat, and then eventually spread out and then go down into Africa. That's utterly ridiculous. But that's the other part of the curse of Ham that you're probably referring to, is how they came up with that racist talking point. It's just because where he migrated afterwards. But anyways, the guest box is open, friends. Anyone who wants to dissent and prove that their God is real, you're more than welcome to do it. The link is on the screen. You don't have to sign up for anything. And Adam says, I'm sure you've been asked, but have you seen Righteous Gemstones? Working at and playing music at mega churches, it's embarrassing how accurate it is. I actually haven't seen it. I've watched one or two of the documentaries coming out about these mega churches falling apart and failing. So that's a real thing that's happened. I was watching the one about Justin Bieber's ex-pastor. That was pretty good. Watched another one about Hillsong falling apart. So there's some good documentaries out there, but I haven't seen Righteous Gemstones yet. I'm gonna have to put that on my to-do list. Definitely appreciate the suggestion. And Khan, Thank you for the super chat. It says Justice for Aisha. Agreed, 1,000,000% Justice for Aisha. And Helen Kimball, the youngest wife of Joseph Smith. I did not know about Helen. So Helen Kimball, the youngest wife of Joseph Smith, her account of being sold to the prophet by her father at 14 is heartbreaking. Oh, that really breaks my heart, actually. I didn't know that there was a child bride that wrote about it inside of Mormonism. That's crazy. I'm going to have to look that up. If you know any good video resources too, like on YouTube or anything like that, shoot me a message on the Discord or in my email. I definitely need to search this up and get more on top of this, because this is like really kind of a big deal. If one of his child brides is like legit out here talking about it, or was. Jim Nasty, good to see you, friend. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, I've been seeing more Eastern Orthodox Christians on TikTok lately. What's your take on them? I'm not really familiar with their brand of loony. Well, to me, like, they're just a more knowing form of Catholicism. They engage in more of the philosophababble than the Catholics do. But it's not that much different. Like if you're familiar with Catholicism, then you'll recognize a lot of what Eastern Orthodox have to offer. There are obviously some differences for sure, but I don't find them to be terribly different. The structure of the services are a little bit different. The last Orthodox church I went to had a 2-hour standard service. But listen, I mean, if you've never been to an Orthodox church service, just find some free time and go. It'd be a learning experience. But yeah, to me, I think they're, kind of a different flavor of Catholicism. Although the Orthodox and the Catholic would disagree with me vehemently. But if you're coming from a Protestant background, you would definitely see the connection. Let's get our next guest in here. How you doing, Judy? Judy, your connection is pretty. Judy, your connection's pretty poor. Can you connect to the Wi-Fi? Judy?
I'm hooked to the Wi-Fi.
Oh, is it dial-up?
No.
Yeah, it's really bad. You got really bad connection, my friend.
I
can't hear a word you're saying.
Yeah, I'm two of your
Judy, my friend, I can't, and you just dropped. Okay. Judy, your connection is not good. You've dropped out. Your connection failed. Maybe refresh your Wi-Fi router and try again. How you doing, Miles?
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Sounds like you actually have a decent connection. So welcome in.
Yeah. So basically, I went.
Miles, are you a believer?
Yes, I do believe in God, but under a certain analytical criteria that would propose a necessary being existing in the first place. So, do you reject the idea of a necessary being necessary in the first place?
So, do you have a specific name for the God, or is it just God? And is there like a
necessary being? That's how I define it.
Yeah, but does it have a name?
No, not necessarily.
Does it have a religion?
But that's how we define a God. I would say that there's some sort of analytical criteria which would prove that God's existence.
Cool. Does it have a religion?
Sort of, not necessarily, but I could eventually establish a religion with it.
What religion is it related to?
Probably Christianity.
Okay, so you're a Christian.
Sure, but then I also want to establish first off that God exists in the first place. Yeah, sure, I can just connect it to it, but that's not necessarily the definition that the Christian God prescribes to.
It's crazy. So many Phil bros come up here and they don't want to say what religion they're part of. It's so weird to me that they do that.
Yeah, but anyways, do you have an objection to necessary?
usually start out with that. That's usually my starting point, like when I was a Christian.
Yeah, but in order to establish the Christian God's existence, you would have to first affirm that there has to be some sort of necessary being in existence in the first place. So
Cool.
do you reject that idea?
Give me premise number 1 for the existence of a necessary deity.
Yeah, premise 1 is just going to be two contradictions cannot exist in the same world. Do you agree with that?
I don't have a reason to not agree with it. I think the idea of a contradiction, I can't seem to find one that exists. So I'm definitely willing to hold that contradictions probably shouldn't or couldn't exist.
Yeah, so if it's the case that contradictions cannot occur, then it's also going to follow that there must be a system which substantiates that statement being true, and I'll just label that as God because that system has to exist in all possible worlds.
I disagree. So when you say a system, you're essentially saying that there is something governing the ability for contradictions to either exist or to not exist. I don't believe that to be the case. I think when we use the laws of logic, we're referring to how the universe behaves, not the system that causes it to behave that way.
Yeah, I'm just talking about an enabler, something that would just enable some sort of statement being true, like two
Why does it need enabled?
Yeah, because if it wasn't going to be enabled, then it would be possible, right? I asked about logical possibility of a contradiction occurring.
Right, I'm asking.
Said it's not possible for.
I'm asking why does that
logically possible world? So there has to be some sort of enabler for that statement to be true in all possible worlds, which should just be necessary.
Yeah, I disagree. My question was, why does contradictions not existing require an enabler causing that to be the case?
Yeah, I already answered this. Once again, if there is some sort of contradiction that can occur, then it's going to be the case that statement's going to be false. And the only way to ensure that contradictions cannot occur in any logically possible world is going to be through some sort of system which enables that statement being true.
Yeah, that didn't answer my question. So what I'm saying is that the laws of logic are prescriptive, not descriptive. Like we're describing the way that the universe behaves, and it just happens to be that the universe doesn't really seem to contain any contradiction. Now, quantum physics might disagree with that, and some of them already have, but I'm not a quantum physicist. As far as I can tell in logic, right, we don't see contradictions. That being said, I have no reason to believe that there's something that causes logic to function in that particular way, like some sort of external entity that is forcing the laws of logic to conform the way that they behave. I'm trying to figure out why I would believe in something that's causing these laws to behave that way.
Yeah, because if the laws didn't have some sort of foundation, then it's going to be the case that they aren't going to be enforced.
Well, they're not laws. That's the point. That's my whole point, is that the laws of logic are descriptive, not prescriptive, so they don't need enforced.
So they're just things that describe the world, right?
I said it 3 times. Yep.
Yeah, if they're just things that describe the world, then it's going to be the case that contradictions can occur in a logically possible, some sort of possible world that we don't have the ability to conceive of.
Well, obviously, if you're talking about worlds that we can't conceive of, I can't make any claims about those worlds. I'm talking about the world that we live in, and as far as we know, in the world that we live in, contradictions don't seem to exist. But that seems to be just the way the universe behaves. What I'd like to know is why there needs to be an external entity that's causing that behavior.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be external to the universe itself. I'm just saying that there has to be some sort of enabler in order for that statement to be true. And when I'm talking about logical possibility from the start, that would just mean in all possible worlds, including one's other universes.
You haven't actually substantiated that claim yet. You just keep restating the same claim over and over again. Why does there need to be an enabler?
Yeah, because if it's the case that you already said that two contradictions cannot occur in any possible world, you don't have the ability to observe any other.
Well, I didn't say that.
So why would it be the case that the laws of logic are just going to be descriptive? You just said that we.
I literally did not say that. I literally said we don't have the ability to know what's happening in other worlds.
To the universe itself.
So what I said is we don't have the ability to investigate what happens in other worlds, nor do we have information about other worlds. We only have information about the world that we actually live in. So in the world that we live in, it seems to be that contradictions can't or don't exist. You still have failed to actually figure out how to answer my question appropriately, which is, why is it that the way the universe behaves, we refer to the laws of logic as descriptive of the universe. Why do we need to presuppose that there's an entity causing that to happen?
Yeah, this is just going to go back to premise one. So the first thing is that you said premise one was two contradictions cannot occur in any logically possible world.
I didn't
You
say that.
said that we don't have the. Yes, that's literally what premise one was.
I literally didn't say that. I said in the world we know, right? I'm not talking about all logically possible worlds. I'm saying in the world that we know, the one that we exist in, it seems to be that logical contradictions can't exist. And one of the reasons why they can't exist is because we've created logical contradictions. Like we've used language in a way to describe things that either contradict and are impossible from the way that we actually formed them.
Yeah, and I'm talking about logical possibilities. So if we have some sort of formed laws of logic, like P or not P, for example, then it's going to be the case that's going to have to be enforced in all logically possible worlds because we're talking about logical modality.
Yeah,
If it is the case
I'm asking you still about the enforcement because, again, they're not prescriptive; they are descriptive, which means they don't
what's the
need
argument
to
for that?
be means they don't need to be enforced. So what I'm still trying to figure out is why I need to presuppose that the laws of logic only exist because something is enforcing them. Why would I believe that?
Yeah, so I think our disagreement is whether or not logic is going to be descriptive or prescriptive. So what's the argument for it being descriptive?
Because in order for it to be descriptive, we would have to demonstrate that it exists somehow transcendentally, and you don't have any evidence of that. The default position is that they are, in fact, prescriptive or descriptive.
Right. So you're saying that in order for something to be prescriptive, it has to like transcend the universe itself. Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying what you're positing, something that is prescriptive for this world that we live in, then it must exist transcendentally.
Okay, and what do you mean by transcendentally?
Meaning it exists, but it's not tangible. It's not necessarily observable. It's something that is a fundamental reality of the universe, even though it doesn't actually seem to exist in the plane of the universe that we live in, where you can actually detect it.
Okay, so you're just saying that it doesn't have to necessarily be observable, it's just going to be immaterial or something like that? I'm not necessarily understanding what you mean by transcendental here.
I think you've run enough tag arguments to know what transcendental means.
Yeah, so I guess my main contention with that is it's just going to be the case that in order for something to be transcendental, I don't think it necessarily has to be prescriptive because there's going to be some sort of descriptive truths that can be transcendental, I guess.
Interesting. Well, why would I believe that the laws of logic are either transcendental or prescriptive? I can't see a single reason to believe that.
Yeah, so the main reason you would probably believe that they're prescriptive rather than descriptive is it's just going to be the case that every single thing in the universe has already conformed to it even before the universe existed when it came to like the Big Bang or any sort of quantum events that most scientists are looking at the moment, which is speculated that the Big Bang was a quantum event rather than just a simultaneous.
We
Boom.
have no idea what happened prior to the Big Bang, so to posit somehow that these laws existed prior to the Big Bang, I think is presumptuous.
Yeah, but the Big Bang still conformed to these laws, right?
It depends on what phase of the Big Bang. I mean, it depends on what scientists you're asking. I personally believe so, yes. I believe that the Big Bang was a sequence, and to have sequencing, you need things like time, you need things like logic, different things like that. But again, they don't conform to the laws of logic. Physics is not conforming to the laws of logic. The laws of logic, as far as I can tell, is just a description using language we invented of how the world works.
Okay, so I guess you're just saying that the laws of logic don't necessarily have to be prescriptive because you don't see any good reasons for why it's the case that the laws of logic aren't transcendental or prescriptive, right?
So when I talk about the laws of logic being descriptive rather than prescriptive, it's basically the same thing that, like the claim on my screen, your God is imaginary, right? The default position on things that are immaterial, undetectable, and don't seem to actually have any evidence for their existence, the default position is going to be that they're somehow a product or derivative of, the human mind, unless we can demonstrate elsewhere, right? Now, if somehow we found a way to like scientifically detect laws of logic, Yeah. Then if that were the case, then I'd say, yeah, well, shit, maybe they are descriptive and maybe they are part of the universe. Maybe they're part of the makeup of the universe. But until we do that, I have no reason to believe that.
Okay. I mean, I guess you probably have to look more into that.
Right. So the default position for things that you can't actually discover, the default position can't be that it must exist unless you prove otherwise, because then I could do the same thing. I could just say, well, the default position on, the life-granting unicorn is that it's true and it's the cause of all things that are living. Well, really, I mean, the fact that we've never seen one, the fact that it seems to violate all the information we know about the world would lead one to believe that the default position on life-granting unicorns should be that they are, in fact, imaginary. I can think of them. They are in my head for sure. But do they exist in real life? I don't believe so.
Okay. So you're basically saying that your only objection to the argument would just be that laws of logic are going to be descriptive. So if it is the case that laws of logic were prescriptive, would the argument follow?
No. See, because if the laws of logic are in fact descriptive and like the universe is behaving according to the laws because they're descriptive, then I still don't know why I would make the laws of logic anything but a naturalistic phenomenon. I have no reason to believe that they are somehow the product of some like eternal mind that's outside of matter, space, and time.
Right, but I'm asking if it was the case that the laws of logic were prescriptive.
Yes, I'm saying if the laws of logic were prescriptive, no, I don't think that I would assume, or that the argument would follow that they came from some sort of intelligence. Like, I have no reason to believe that.
Yeah, but that wasn't the argument. The argument was just there's some sort of enabler that would allow that statement to be true.
Well, when you use the word enabler, you're inferring that it's an agent. I don't believe so. I think if the laws of logic were in fact prescriptive, I don't think we need an agent for that.
I don't necessarily think it has to be an agent.
Well, then it could just be a naturalistic phenomenon, right?
Yeah, it would just be a naturalistic enabler.
Right, I agree. So like here's where I'm at with a lot of these presuppositional like arguments, which is like if we're going to presuppose that there is something causing our reality to be the way that it is, I think it's simpler to presuppose naturalistic phenomenon. So for example, I mentioned the life-granting unicorn, and I kind of say this in jest, but the life-granting unicorn is actually a really good tool for this argument because, like, for example, if I'm talking to someone who's like, well, you can't explain how life came from non-life. First of all, I think we actually can, but even if I couldn't, I think it's actually easier just to say, okay, well, if we're going to invent something or we're going to imagine something that is capable of giving life, I think a life-granting unicorn is equally as plausible as any of the gods that are made up by religion and have a lot less entailments. The life-granting unicorn, I don't have to justify why the life-granting unicorn has child brides or why it is doing genocides or why it allowed slavery. It's way a simpler explanation.
Yeah. So I guess how exactly would you explain the natural order of the universe in the first place, using naturalism rather than some sort of intelligent being?
Yeah, so I don't actually think the universe is in order. I think the universe is mostly chaos, and I think that there are like pockets of order that pop up in the universe over the course of time. But I mean, in the end, it's going to be a complete disaster. The universe is going to either die a very cold death because everything's spread so far apart that there can't be any heat transfer, or it's going to rebound back in on itself and it's going to be one big hot mess again, and we're going to go through another expansion, just like the Big Bang, like we did before. And in all of those cases, it's just complete destruction. In fact, in about 1 billion years, our sun is going to destroy most of our solar system. Earth is going to be burned up.
Okay. I mean, that's an interesting reason to believe that naturalism is better explainer for that, but why do you think the universe is not really in order?
Why would I believe that it is? Like when I look out in a universe, I see mostly chaos. Like we look at the order on Earth, right? And we say, well, that this the fact that we have order means that something must have put it in order. But to me, I think the reason why we have any type of order is just because, like the laws of physics, specifically gravity. Like gravity, like I don't think people realize how thankful we should be for gravity, because without gravity, a lot of shit would, like, nothing's gonna work.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, like, just because, like, these principles of physics, because they work the way that they work, it allows things to actually form chemical bonds. And when things can form chemical bonds, they can start to do other things, which is really fun. So, like I just think the laws of physics have allowed us, for this short time period in history, to form something that is really interesting, complex, and intricate. But we're all going to be destroyed one day. We're not going to exist.
Okay. I mean, that's interesting. It's a lot to think about. But good chat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fun to think about. No one likes to think about the fact that we're going to be annihilated. But I mean, I think it's parsimonious with what we see in the rest of the universe. The rest of the universe is, kind of a chaotic void full of, giant balls of plasma.
Yeah.
Well, so
good chat.
How did you end on the Christian God?
Yeah, so basically I just draw from the necessary being existing that there has to be some sort of other thing, like for a design, for example, and other transcendental arguments that would just allow me to believe that other things such as knowledge, morality, logic, all have to exist in some sort of transcendental mind, which the best contender for being that transcendental mind would just be the Christian God.
Sure. So let's imagine for a second that I would grant you that there's a creator, right? I think there's a couple things that we could deduce from that. I think number one is that the type of creator probably isn't like the omni God. He's not omni-loving or omnibenevolent, as it said, or omnipotent, or all-knowing. So, and you've done enough philosophy that you know exactly why. It's because of the problem of evil. Now, in Christianity, you guys have an answer for the problem of evil typically, but you don't have an answer for the problem of natural evil. And this goes to the whole design argument, right? Like this idea that we're designed. Well, if we're designed, there's a lot of questionable things, and the habitat that was designed for us. I can't see a good reason why an all-knowing, all-loving, good God would create a world in which 100,000 people a year are killed in natural disasters, and then on top of it, another 100,000 people are like maimed and paralyzed, or end up vegetabilized. This is not, to me, consistent with a God that has all these omni attributes.
Yeah, so how I usually respond to the problem of evil is there's a couple of ways I do respond. Some are not going to be as powerful as others, but the first thing I usually do is I just point out that atheists don't have any solution or have any position on what evil or bad would be, so I don't see why they would even point it out in the first place, but I can see it being an internal critique. And if it's just an internal critique, I'll just reply by saying, like, if it is the case that there was no evil or suffering or free will in the first place, we wouldn't be able to get any virtues such as honesty, some other things like, I'm trying to remember the exact word. But there's some other virtues that cannot exist without evil and suffering existing in the first place.
Well, I think that puts the cart before the horse, because I'm not suggesting that there should never be sadness or there should never be, a lack of joy or anything like that. Although that's what heaven is, according to Revelation 21, verse 8, or 7 and 8. But that being said, I'm not saying that we should only have good. What I'm saying is that what you shouldn't have is unnecessary torment, right? So when I look at like the suffering in the world, I'm dividing it. Some of it seems to be probably necessary in your worldview, not mine. And some of it is clearly unnecessary. I view the natural disasters, bone cancer in children, parasites that crawl up your pee-pee when you swim in the river too long. These are unnatural causes of suffering that don't seem to coincide with a God that is all good and all loving.
Yeah, I would just say he's not really in control of those things, and so far that he would violate the natural order of things within the world in order to stop like parasites from crawling up your pee-pee, for example. I don't necessarily think he would intervene just for those specific reasons, because that would just be in violation of him just letting the natural order of the world be.
Right, but I don't think we need him to intervene. I think it was a design choice from the beginning. Like, could God have designed the world in which A, babies aren't born with bone cancer, and B, natural disasters didn't happen?
I guess he could have, but then I
Right.
don't believe in just some sort of 7-day creation. I
No,
just
that
believe in like some sort of natural order of evolution in the first place. Whether or not it's going to be natural or divine or guided by divine revelation or something like that is, I'm sort of agnostic on that.
okay. So you might be interested. Have you read any of the research or the publications by BioLogos?
No, not necessarily.
It'd be a good place to start. That they believe, it's an apologist organization, but there's a lot of scholars actually involved, and they accept the findings of evolution and science, and they integrate it with their theology. So it's a good place to check. I actually got some friends that are part of the organization. That being said, if God, right, is all powerful, he's all knowing, he knows the future, and he's all good, then whether or not he's using a natural process or whether or not he's like physically causing things to be at the beginning of creation, he still knew the way things were going to play out, which means he's still he's still responsible for the natural disasters. Like, so for example, if I create machines for a living. If I create a machine and I'm going to, let's say I make a robot, right? And I give it eyeballs that shoot flames and fingers that are like made out of knives. And then like periodically every 30 minutes or so, let's just say that it emits like a toxic gas. And then I put this thing in a house with 100 people. Like, I don't really know what's going to happen. Like, I can't guarantee I know what this thing is going to do because it's got AI technology. It could do whatever it wants. But I did still design it, and I knew what it was capable of. And I had the power to not design it that way. I could have designed it any way I wanted. And so I'm responsible for what the robot does, even if I can't necessarily, even if I didn't cause it to do everything that it does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of, but then I would just say that there shouldn't be other virtues that exist as a result of evil and suffering existing in the first place. But I feel like that position just could be equally as applicable to like an anti-natalist sort of argument as well. Like, if you know you have the capacity to create some sort of other human being and they would undergo suffering, or they have the ability to undergo suffering, immense suffering in this world, then why would you create it in the first place? And I would just say that you would create it because existence is probably going to be one of the best things that could possibly happen to anybody. But I feel like that logic could just be applied to other positions which you might not be consistent with.
Right. So again, that's where I would divide this idea of necessary versus unnecessary. Right. So if there is some necessary that is required for the formation of virtues, which that's a whole separate argument. We can go there if we need to. But if that's the case, then I would consider those to be necessary. Right. I'm concerned with the unnecessary ones. Like, well, for example, the natural disasters. Theoretically, the God that you believe in created the planet. Like, he knew what the planet was going to do. And according to the biblical narrative, like prior to the fall of Adam and Eve, it seems like there wasn't natural disasters. It seems like we didn't have some of this stuff going on. And then after the fall, we got these natural disasters and he cursed the earth and whatnot. It seems like that is unnecessary. That doesn't seem to be required for anything.
Right, but what are you talking about when you're saying necessary in the sense?
So when I say necessary, I mean it can't be any other way. So like if you say, for example, that God needs natural disasters in order to bring about virtues, then I'm going to put you in a double bind. Well, I'm going to say, well, if God needs natural disasters in order to teach you virtues, that means he couldn't have done it any other way, which means now you're limiting God's power. You're suggesting that God is incapable of teaching you virtues unless he unleashes horrors on you. But then that denies the fact that an all-powerful being couldn't just have created you with a better perception of a better ability to perceive virtues.
Yeah, so basically what I think I'm trying to steel man is, so you're basically saying that if God needed some sort of evil and suffering in order for virtues to become as a result of it, then you just deny it? Or would say that God is bounded by them?
What I'm saying is it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like if you say God is incapable of teaching you virtues unless he inflicts untold horrors upon you by natural disasters, then I would say that means God is simply not all-powerful. He's not capable of teaching you virtues in another way. So the minute you admit that he's incapable of teaching you virtue without making you suffering, then you've admitted that there's something he can't do. So it turns into a double bind.
Yeah, so I'll just respond by basically saying that those virtues come necessarily from suffering in the first place. They're just like, by definition, certain things will come as a result of suffering.
Sure,
which
but
God doesn't have to create those things directly, because they have to come as a result from suffering.
but
It's just like a definitional criteria.
but specific causes, right? So for example, I've learned virtues in my life and I never had to get bone cancer to do it. I've learned virtues in my life and I never had to have a building collapse on me during an earthquake, right? So the question is, why do these natural disasters need to be required for their virtues when it seems to be that these virtues typically can be learned through much lesser pain?
I guess I wouldn't have a direct response to that.
Right.
I'm not
I get
necessarily
that.
sure.
Now, that being said, here, you sound like a nice young man. So here's where I think a lot of people are at in the deconstruction community. And I'm sure that like the philosophy arguments go well, with people who haven't heard them before. But most of the people in my live stream, and myself included, like we've kind of heard Tag and all the other arguments so long that just, as a kind of a heads up, when you come into a live stream like mine and you start running some of the arguments, just be warned that not only have we heard it, but the people in the comments are probably going to say crazy stuff about you because like we've heard it so many times. I think there are probably better arguments out there than like the transcendental argument or any of these presuppositional arguments. I don't know if they're great arguments, but I think they are better. And I'll give you an example from one of your own historians. If you read the works of the early church fathers, guys like Justin Martyr and Origen, they believed that the best evidences for the Christian God being real was in fact the Bible and the prophecies being fulfilled. And so maybe that should be something you should study, on top of your philosophy. Because I got to be honest, I've never met an atheist that converted to religion because of philosophy.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like it sounds good. Yeah. You might win some arguments with it because you're debating someone who's never done philosophy before, but I don't think it converts people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. All right, listen, man, thanks for chatting with me. I kept you a little bit longer than I think you wanted, but I appreciate you chatting with me.
Yeah, good chat.
All right, cheers. Well, that was interesting. I was curious how many circles we'd go in with the Phil Bro stuff, but it looks like we didn't go in too many circles. And what are you gonna do? All right, let me grab a couple super chats, and then we'll get our next guest pulled in. We've got a couple people in the queue waiting to get in. And Josh, thank you for the super chat. It says Righteous Gemstones is hilarious. I believe you, and obviously now I want to watch it. And I agree also, Josh, that pre-sup post stupid. Big W, yeah. We've heard the pre-sup stuff so many times here. I'm surprised that the pre-suppers still believe that it's effective. Carnage asada, great name by the way, and nearly my favorite taco. I like the carne asada taco. Like 9 out of 10 times, that's what I'm going to get. But thank you for the $10 super chat. It says, could you dig into the criticisms of the Kenite hypothesis and what your viewpoint is on that? I've been doing some homework, and this one's got me stymied. So I love the Kenite hypothesis, also known as the Midianite hypothesis, and the general idea is this: it's like the narrative of Moses in the Old Testament. They believe there's like a kernel of truth in that, which is that there was a guy who left Egypt that dwelt with a priest in Midian and worshipped the god of Midian. And according to modern archaeology, it seems to be that Yahweh originally came from the area of Midian and Edom. And if you look up some of the recent archaeological works connecting Yahweh with metallurgy, from the land of Edom, it becomes even more evident that he seems to be more of a god of the southern Levant, more of the god that eventually became the deity of Judah, and then eventually, obviously, to Israel. So Moses theoretically left Egypt, went to the land of Midian, learned about the god Yahweh there from the Midianites, and then when he developed his people group in what became, probably the land of Edom, east or somewhere just east of the river, he used Yahweh as that deity. And of course, later on, there became a big myth that built up around Yahwism, and they kind of invented their own mythology to match the cultural heritage of the Judeans and the Israelites. And they conflated the god El with the god Yahweh later. We can see that in Exodus chapter 6, verses 2 and 3. And Mark S. Smith has written about this. I think I recommended some works by Mark to you. You might also want to look up The Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Canaan by John Day. And there's been some work by other scholars. I think we can probably leave it there for now, but my personal viewpoint is I think the Kenite hypothesis is a good one. I think ultimately it's unprovable. That's why it's a hypothesis. But I think the Kenite/Midianite hypothesis does a lot of justice to the fact that Yahweh seems to be having an origin in northeastern Egypt and south and southeast Levant. He doesn't seem to come from the northern tribes. He seems to be an artifact of the south near the Egyptian border, even from the Negev. And we see remnants of this even in the Bible. It talks about how God reigned originally from Seir, from the land of Edom. So hope that helps. And Josh says, isn't it ironic that Philbro rhymes with dildo? And one of those two things is infinitely more exciting than the other. And Dr. Pizza, thank you for the super chat, says, premise one, I have found a script that both reaffirms my beliefs and I think it makes me sound smart, therefore God, specifically my version of the Christian God. I think that's about it, actually. I think that sums it up how the Philbro scripts work out. That seems to be the case. And make the best of what's around, says the Ark Encounter is the curse of Ken Ham. I've never heard that, and I'm sad that I haven't heard that yet. That's phenomenal. Thank you for that. And Marcus says, thanks for taking my question, Justin. You're truly an inspiration. Keep fighting the good fight, brother. Well, thank you, Marcus. I appreciate that. And thank you for supporting and helping Megas with us tonight. Says, dear Doug, please no more Phil Bro word salad tonight. Well, we'll do what we can. We're going to do what we can. And LA Silver Surfer, good to see you tonight, friend. Thank you for the $5 super thanks. And also Snickerdoodle, one of my favorite cookies, by the way. Thank you for the $10 super chat. It says Doug11 states, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Doug, and the Word was Doug. This verse says that Doug, the Word, existed eternally with God, and God was creator. It's Douglical. I can't argue with that. Anyone who's been on my channel long enough knows that the scriptures literally talk about Doug endlessly. It literally says in Exodus 32 that God is a rock. It's right there in the text. So I don't really know what more we can do other than just read the Bible. And Connor, thank you for sending out some DZ subscription. I really appreciate that. And the Church of Four, thank you so much for being a subscriber. It says, newish subscriber, I've been shamelessly nicking your arguments. Wouldn't mind a combo at some point if you chat with atheists. Well, I typically don't unless I run out of theists to chat with. But thank you so much for subbing and for watching and supporting the channel. I do really appreciate that. And guys, I've got a ton of super chats, and I'm sorry that I'm backed up. I got to get a guest in here and keep the conversation flowing. I'll do my best to catch up on the super chats when I'm able. And Johanna says, thank you so much, by the way. Says, what a supreme bummer to be born with parents who became Jehovah's Witnesses in their 20s. They got birthday and Christmas presents, and now they deny their kids these pleasures. That's the craziest thing about the JWs, is that the lack of gifts. They simply will not give gifts. It's weird to me. Jesus talks about giving gifts. He says, what good father, if their child asks for bread, will give them a stone? Crazy. Gifts is normal. Aaron says, I was really looking forward to DC's version of Star Trek with The Enemy Within with two Justins. I don't know what The Enemy Within is. Anyways, I do like a little bit of Star Trek, though. I could definitely go for that. Thank you for the super chat, Aaron. Good to see you tonight. And Bernie says, Deuteronomy 6:16. I do not put your audio to the test. Big W, but we did test it tonight. Thank you for the super chat. Hebrew English Bible read. Thank you so much for the 666. Hail Nero says, Justin, a Christian on X tried to argue that John 3:13 reads, no one has ever gone to heaven and return, to avoid the issue. Dishonest NLT translation. Yeah, it's dishonest. That's why I don't read the NLT. They're too apologetic. And you're right, it doesn't say and. That's not at all what it says. But listen, Christian's going to cope. And Carlos, big W, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, ready for today's dinner. Well, I hope you are ready. We're going to get our next guest in here, and we're going to keep the night rolling. Thank you so much, Carlos, for the super chat. It looks like we've got now, I can't read the name because the text is too small, but is it Candu? The Candu?
I think it's the Candiru.
Oh, Candiru. Sorry, the letters are kind of scrunched together.
That's me.
How you doing, Candiru?
Hey, so I'm not here to debate. I actually had a question for you that kind of leans toward deconstructing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend. I'd been friends with this person for many years, and this friend kind of went over the deep end and became a super, conspiracy theorist, Bible-based Christian, living in the depths of the internet where UFOs are demonic and the Earth is 5,000 years old and just really crazy shit. I immediately started, I'm a pretty benign person. I'm not someone who likes to go around debating anybody, but the conversation eventually devolved into me bringing up, among other things, biblical inconsistencies. And this person brought up dispensationalism.
Yeah.
And when you brought it up, I'd heard it before, but I didn't really whatever. But this person was using dispensationalism to sort of justify these biblical contradictions, basically saying something along the lines of, well, it was true at the time, it was true when God said it, and blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And this was years ago. I haven't talked to the person since. But
well, that's not really how dispensationalism works. Like dispensationalism is that there's typically dispensations, sometimes a period of 1,000 years, where, it's not usually always 1,000, depends on who you ask, but where God is doing different things in this dispensation. So you might say, well, in this dispensation, God gave the law, and this is why he gave the law. But now in this new dispensation, we don't have the law, right? So that's kind of the idea dispensations. It gets you from point A to point B, even though things are changing. But dispensationalism never gets rid of contradictions. Like if one verse says something that is just a straight statement, and another verse later says the exact opposite, like what we were just reading in John 3:13, no one has ascended into heaven, when we know that Elijah has ascended into heaven. Well, listen, dispensationalism will never fix that.
Well, yeah, I mean that makes sense, and that's one of the things that I basically brought up to this person. I said, "Hey, that sounds like a massive load of shit," what you just said. Not you, but this person when they said it to me. And B, those contradictions are still there. Those contradictions are still contradictions. It didn't take much longer after that for me to realize, A, that this person is like gone. And B, it became very clear that I'm probably never going to talk to this person again. And I didn't. This was several years ago. But I was kind of left haunted by it, only because, it doesn't make me doubt anything. But it was haunting in that this person was so ready to sort of dismiss reason, being reasonable, in favor of this absolute nonsense. And ever since then, I've kind of felt like, the more I see in the world around me, the more I see in the society around me, like everybody's going crazy. And sometimes I guess I just don't know how to deal with it. And I don't know, as someone who's deconstructed, how do you see things? Like, how do you sort of deal with the craziness that's going on around us? And sometimes, the craziness that I hear some of these people calling in, some of the things I hear them justifying, some of the things I hear coming out of their mouths, it's like, what do we do in the face of that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things, right? So, for example, it's important to remember that a lot of the people who are saying these crazy things, are otherwise normal people, but they've been brainwashed. They've been raised to believe the nonsense, right? So, for example, like I know very intelligent people. I know people with PhDs who believe in the nonsense. I know a medical doctor who's a devout Christian, right? So, like a lot of times these people, they just don't, the amount of critical thinking that they use in everyday life, they just don't apply it to the religion, right? Because they assume it's true for the same reason that like once somebody gets really comfortable like watching a particular news station, they stop looking at the news station critical. But when they see a different news station, one they haven't seen before, they're being rather critical of like the article, especially if it's political, right? So like we have blind spots where once we've learned to trust something, we stop thinking critically about it. When we don't do that with everything. We like normally we're actually pretty critical thinkers. Not that everyone's like that. Some people don't think critically at all, and those people do exist. But I certainly think that the problem with religion is that we get so comfortable giving it a pass and assuming it's true that we just forget to apply logic to it. Now, for me, like I grew up so culturally Christian that if you would have asked me at any point before I was a real Christian if I believed in the Bible, I would say, yeah, of course it's the Bible. The Bible's true, right? So like, even before I had read the dang thing, I would have just told you it's true because it's the Bible, because it's how I was raised, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I guess what started you on the path to deconstruction was actually reading the Bible, or was there more to it?
No, for me, I think it was studying the Bible for sure.
Okay, so it was like the Penn Jillette, read the Bible,
yeah,
because kind of thing. Yeah,
the Christians that I surrounded myself with were decent people. You know what I mean? Like I knew that crazy Christians existed, like ones that would justify genocide and nonsense. I didn't go to church with those people. I went to church with very normal, decent people. So like for me, I never had to worry that I didn't think that Christianity was dangerous. I didn't think that Christianity was fundamentally bad for humanity. Those are all opinions I gained after I deconstructed and started to see how it warped people's brains. The same way you've probably seen, where people, normally decent people can be convinced to do horrific things.
I mean, yeah. So back to this person that I was talking about earlier, I kind of saw how it kind of devoured her, and how it gets kind of devoured. I've taken on this view that religion, and this doesn't apply to all the religions, but like Islam and Christianity, they're almost predatory.
Yeah, they have to be,
in the sense that they smell. It's almost like your pain and your suffering and your insecurities and your weakness is like chum in the water, and these religions are like hungry sharks.
Yeah,
jumping on it, and it's very it's just a very scary thing. Anyway, look, that's it. That's all I have. I kind of just wanted to get that out there.
Listen, it was good to hear from you, and best of luck. Engaging in dialogue with some of these people, because it takes patience.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Have a great one. All right, let me grab one or two super chats and we'll move right on to our next guest. We got a couple people that have been waiting to get in. And Johanna says, I've always known about selective hearing, but since started watching your show, I've learned about selective reading. Yeah, with Christianity, it's not just selective reading. Literally, people that are choosing purposely to not read, they are ignoring. And Jennifer, thank you for the $9.99 super chat. It says, lady who did my tattoo is named Rocks. She must be a prophetess of Doug. I guess that means I was tattooed by one of Doug's disciples. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I know, and I now have his rock solidness coursing through my veins, Hill Doug. That Jennifer, that makes me so happy. I'm actually rock hard for your Rocks tattoo artist. Big W. And I hope you enjoy your tattoo. I don't have any tattoos, but I love tattoos. But Doug hasn't moved me to get any tattoos just yet. Sam says, always great cooking here, Justin. Thanks for all the great streams. Well, Sam, thanks so much for supporting the stream and for watching. I appreciate that. And Kay, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. It says, thanks for what you do. I'm 34 and I deconstructed when I was about 15. You were smarter than me. You were way smarter than me. When I was 15, I was making excuses. It isn't easy, and it caused many fights in my family, but it's worth it. I agree. Totally worth it. It will cause fights. It will cause some disagreements here and there, but that's how that works. Day Oneland, die. I'm going to call you Die. Thank you for sending out 5 Deconstruction Zone gifted memberships. I really do appreciate that. And also, Scylla Tax a bit. Good to see you tonight, friend. It says, diving in my new NRSV 5th edition, I feel sorry for Christians who have piled this mountain of guilt and fear onto their backs. Just why? That's the craziest thing, is that they're legitimately piling guilt on top of themselves. I had a roommate once that literally thought that if he didn't repent of his sins every day, and then if he died unrepentant, he would still go to hell despite being a Christian. Crazy. AR, thank you for the $10 super chat. Says, I greatly appreciate what you do here. I was raised evangelical and was troubled with doubt. It would drive me insane for good reason. It turns out that there are problems. You have helped me a lot. AR, I'm so glad you shared that with me. When you're in the faith and everyone is telling you it's true and you're reading it and you're like, don't look true to me. It looks problematic to me. Just know you're not the crazy one. You're like the only one out there that's being rational. So I'm glad you made it to the other side. With that, we're going to bring Judy up with us. How you doing, Judy?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you must have your technology worked out.
I switched over to my iPad.
Well, it is absolutely working. So welcome in, Judy.
Cool. I don't have a whole lot. I want to thank you for all that you're doing. You've been quite the entertainment for me. Right now I'm bedridden.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, it's God's fault. Anyway, um, so I just had a couple things. Um, when I was 4, before I made my first communion, um, my mother sent me and my brother to church all the time. So one day he said, "Oh, Judy, I think that's Ma up there." So he made me go up, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I hadn't done a communion, but I was kind of scared because God was gonna send a lightning bolt down if you go and have your first communion before you've been whatever the process is.
Right, yeah.
I went and I did it, and guess what? Nothing happened.
No
And
smiting.
no, nothing. And I knew, I knew then that it was BS.
Hmm.
I was just a little kid, and I knew it was just BS. Um, and the other night, my son and I were having a conversation, and he's talking about like the Bible, religion being more occult as as opposed to anything else. Just a way to control people. And he says, but he says, I don't like hearing that there's no God. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't call it God. It's not what it is. It's the universal life energy, and we're all connected to each other. Every single one of us, every plant, everything. We're just all this energy, and we're connected to each other on many levels, and that shows up a lot, just hanging out. And then the other thing, is Einstein. He um, had a interview with somebody. It was like one of his last interviews, and he talked about um, like the energy, and uh, you know I can't repeat it. And it's funny because I had the same experience back in about 91. I had a near death experience, and and I explained it to people like, you can't really, you don't have a brain to think, you don't have a body to feel, you don't have anything, that substantial, so you can't really explain what happened. But I knew something happened. And then, I don't know, about a month ago, I listened to this thing of Einstein's, and he said it pretty well. It's kind of like, the energy, because we're all energy, every one of us. We all have our energy, and he talks about how it kind of continues on. Um, but I don't
Einstein
have
said
the,
that.
yeah,
I've never heard
and
that quote before.
yeah, well, it's actually a whole story about from the guy who took the interview. The interview was in '54, and he died in '55. Um, but yeah, I found it on the on YouTube, and I was
So,
listening.
do you believe in like universal consciousness?
I'm not, kind of, sorta. I believe that we are all, like if you start with the Big Bang, you know, I mean, whatever was there, I mean, energy does it. You can't get rid of it, and you can't add to it, type thing. So
Yeah, it can't be created or destroyed.
yeah, and so the whole idea of we all started from exactly the same thing, all of us. And how we evolved or whatever is almost moot. I don't believe that there's any kind of a guy with a long beard or anybody that has any kind of control. I think it's us who does. I
Yeah,
think
it's certainly not a guy up there who's like concerned about what you're doing with yourself in your bedroom. That's crazy.
exactly. But I think it's the important thing is trying to pull people together.
Well, I'm all about that, Judy. I want to bring people together, not divide people. That's why I want to get rid of religions. Religions divide people, and it causes us to have animosity where there really doesn't need to be any.
Correct. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. But I've just been listening to you for a while, and you've been an inspiration. And I've listened to other people, and I find myself saying, "Yeah, but bring up the slaves," or stuff like that when they're talking to other
Yeah.
non-believers. But I do
Well, I appreciate
appreciate,
that, Judy. It's very kind of you.
and you're a joy to listen to.
Well, Big W, thank you for listening. And
W mean?
what's that?
What does big W mean?
Oh, that just means big win.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, it's a sports term, but it gets used a lot online.
No, I'm 66 years old, so I'm a little bit behind.
I mean, listen, I get it. I walk in the conversations online with Gen Z, and I have no idea what's happening. I have to inquire myself. I'm no spring chicken anymore either. But listen, you're here, and you're learning, and you're so. I mean, definitely a win for you for being out here and learning and growing.
Well, I just wanted I've been dying to talk to you just to say hey and to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Judy. I really appreciate it. And definitely, if you're interested, join our Discord. There's a link in my profile to a Discord. It's an offline community where we talk about a lot of these subjects, and you can direct message people there.
Okay, I will try to find it.
I believe in you.
I've subscribed to you I think you have 2 channels, and I subscribe to you regardless.
Well, thank you so much.
So I'll go digging for it, and thank you very much. And you have a great night.
Hey, thanks. Have a great one, Judy.
Okay, bye.
Well, she was delightful. Big W for Judy. I'm glad she stopped in to say hi. And Designed, good to see you tonight. Thank you so much for the super chat. It says, if the world is finely tuned, God's true nature is that of the kid that shakes the ant farm daily. I think that's it. The fine tuning argument always falls apart once you start talking about what's happening here on the earth. It doesn't turn out well. And Kip, thank you for sending out 5 DZ memberships. I really appreciate that. It's super generous. Big W. And D Banks Design, big W. Thank you so fucking much for the $100 super chat. Super appreciate the support. Says, love the host, love the info, but most of all, the Christian comedians that continually come on and get cooked. Laughs are always needed. Appreciate the best channel on YouTube. Well, thank you so much, D Banks Design. I totally appreciate that. And thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. And thanks for cheering on. We're going to keep cooking. We got people in the queue waiting to come in. And the Bard one, thank you for the super chat. Says, hey, Justin, if you haven't already, could you please give your take on Dr. Hillman and what's going on in Mark 14:51. So this is the passage where Jesus is theoretically discovered with a young boy, who's not fully clothed. But that's not really the way the story reads. Dr. Hillman is a mook. He has no idea what he's talking about. He just says sensationalized stuff to get noticed. He's a goof. He has no biblical training. He shouldn't be reading the Bible. He knows Greek. That's great, but that's not really helpful. So, anyways, there in Mark, there's a story of a boy when the soldiers are coming for Jesus and his disciples, and they're grabbing hold of everybody. They grab hold of this young man who is got like just a single piece tunic, or a sheet, and he runs off. In order to escape, he runs off and ends up naked, right? And a lot of people had suggested, well, this is like Jesus doing nefarious stuff with young men, it's pederasty. That doesn't seem to be the case. My personal opinion, I think Richard Bauckham has the best explanation of this passage. He wrote about it in Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. It's an apologetic book, but I like his explanation. And he gives multiple explanations. My personal favorite explanation, which I've heard elsewhere, is that most likely this was such a well-known story, like the early community that knew Mark and Mark's audience. They knew about the young man in the community that had to escape in such a way that he ended up naked. How do you not notice that, right? But one of the things that Mark probably did in order to hide his identity was not give his name. But probably it was kind of like, hey, so-and-so was there, just so you know. I can't tell you who it was because I'm not giving away the names of all these people that were there, lest they be rounded up and persecuted. But this kid was there, and you all know the kid. You all know who I'm talking about. He was the one that ran away naked, right? So that's one excuse or one explanation. Another explanation could be that it's an allegorical take, and that certainly could be the case. It could be an allegory for something else. I don't know what it would be an allegory for, but a lot of scholars have endeavored to tell you what they think it's an allegory for. St. Brush says, big win, Judy. Hail, Judy. I agree. Big win, Judy. Big win, Judy. Leaving religion is tough. And hanging around with us heathens can be tough sometimes as well. And Quantum Benoids. Thank you for the super chat. It says, hail, Doug, and thank you, Justin. You keep me calm while driving with tongue speakers and end times prophecy. Keep up what you do. I can't imagine going on a road trip with people speaking in tongues. I went to a church where people spoke in tongues, and it was wild. It was absolutely wild, but all the best to you. And Johanna, thank you again for the super chat. It says, believers should read The Naked Ape. The book is almost 60 years old, but makes a lot of sense. Now I wish I had read it, because I actually don't know what is in The Naked Ape, but it sounds interesting. So thank you for the suggestion. I always get good book recommendations here. Thank you, Joanne. I will definitely give it a look. And now we've got Nate with us. How you doing, Nate?
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, I know last week I was here. I got absolutely roasted by the Discord chat. But either way, I just wanted to just ask a few things, more about clarity, because even just the word deconstruction, I had initially just interpreted that to be like, in philosophy, there's Derrida, who was like an anti-realist deconstructionist, where he didn't even like everything is a word game. But you're talking more about faith deconstruction when it comes to more, not so much deconstructing everything, but simply deconstructing, reprogramming what you were learned that simply isn't true. Is that more correct?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. So the idea of deconstruction, which is kind of like what we do at seminary and Bible college, is like we're given like a fully completed house, right? So the act of deconstruction is saying, listen, we got this house. Maybe the bones are rotten. Maybe the siding needs replaced. Maybe the windows need double paned. So the idea is like, listen, we're going to take this all down. We're going to strip it down to the studs, and we're going to see what part of this is worth keeping, what part of this makes sense, and what part of it doesn't make sense. So we're literally taking it apart. We're reverse engineering it in a way, and we're saying, okay, does what we've been given, does it make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. I just know that in like I'm just saying, like, if you even look at Wikipedia, the type of deconstruction that you see is not the same kind that, like, it sounds more faith deconstruction. There was like this kind of anti-realist movement, but it's semantics at this point. But another couple of things I just wanted to ask. I agree that like the term transcendentals, like philosophy bros have used it like kind of, to kind of mean abstract fixed things. But I had heard of the term emergent properties, and I felt like that kind of, even if it's not like the best thing that, it describes everything. Like, I feel like the idea that there are emergent orders of things like of simply justice, because you talked about occasionally like good and bad can be subjective to us, but like you can't deny justice. So when arguing God and stuff, like if you're saying that, you know, we can say that it feels good or bad, but if we're talking about like genocide, the reason why we can't just say it's subjective there is because like justice exists. And I was just wondering if that follows, or I'm just kind of getting too much into some philosophy bro content myself.
So I do like what you said. First of all, like good and bad are inherently subjective, and sometimes even justice is subjective, because the idea of justice is that everyone gets or doesn't get what they deserve. And so the question is sometimes, well, what do they deserve? Like we don't always know. Like, for example, we don't always agree on what the punishment might be for a crime, but we do agree that the idea of justice is that everyone should have some sort of fair treatment, right? But to me, I find this to be just like the laws of logic. I think these are prescriptive. Justice only exists because we've defined something that we believe in, and we just happen to call it justice. And I think animals have a sense of justice as well. Like we've done studies with animals.
Bees,
yeah, they seem to have a sense of justice.
Yeah, and ants. Like what I've learned also is just like, at least in my mind, when I hear subjective or relative, like my mind initially jumps to relativism. But I think of it like in economics, there's like subjective value, but it doesn't mean that it is subjectivism. And I just wanted to make sure that, like, you know, you don't like, if anything, like objectivism or something would be prior to even like God, or maybe I'm not articulating it well, but I guess the other last thing, because obviously you have other people. I just wanted to ask also about I don't know if you may have heard of Jung and the idea of rites of passage and maturity and growth. There's also people like Eliade and ritual theory and Rudolf Otto and numinosity. And I was just wondering if there's any other ideas that, while you can certainly, you know, if the Bible's ahistorical, you know, what maybe can you take out of it, if, you know, even a consolation that can help, I think, you know, help help people flourish from learning about the cognitive side of religion.
Sure. So like Jung and people that came after had this idea of like, we have these archetypals, narratives that keep showing up over and over again. And it seems like humans have this propensity to be drawn towards archetypes. And some scholars have written about this. There's a scholar named Daniel Hawk who wrote a commentary on Joshua that sort of dug into some of the classic archetypes and how they show up in the Bible. And he had this idea that like the reason why these archetypes show up in the Bible is because they so well transmit and communicate some of the most important principles that are being taught in the Bible. So this idea that, you know, people that are lowest on the food chain shouldn't be oppressed. The idea that finding somebody that you truly love is a worthwhile endeavor, even if it's painful. So like, but his point of view was not that God planned it or that these are transcendental or anything like that, but just that these are values that we developed as human beings living in society, and so they're somewhat subjective. But I do agree with that. I think we can find these like people in the Bible that embody these archetypes, and they communicate really good messages to us. Now, of course, sometimes they communicate bad messages, but like if you're reading Judges and you see where the people of Israel are being attacked, and Jael invites, you know, a leader into the tent to supposedly rest, and then, you know, sneaks a tent peg and puts it through his head. We get this story of like this no-name non-hero who becomes the hero of the story. We love that kind of shit. Like it just is such a good
warms your
story,
heart.
right? Yeah.
And I guess just with that, I also just wanted to point out, you were talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. XJW Panda Tower, he has a 10-minute, like, all-in-one, like, the story of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is insane. And I was also just looking into, you know, there's a good reason all the excommunication that Jehovah's Witnesses does. They are the, you know, arguably them and Christian Scientists are some of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to their ethical practices. So just, you know, if anyone is interested in what not to do, I would just, you know, highly recommend just knowing not to go there. That's all. And yeah, thank you. And also maybe I'd like to hear a little bit about the Holy Trinity and ideas, because it's very hard to talk to people because they're so sure of themselves. And I don't know, on your Bad Bible guide, I am a subscriber. I just thought you, I definitely want to look into, you know, that area too, because it's just so just paradoxical at face value, but that's all.
Well, I agree. And I think the problem with the Trinity is most kindergartners can see the issue. 1 + 1 + 1 is just 3, right? So if God is 1 and Jesus is 1 and the Holy Spirit is 1, then in fact you've got 3 gods. And you might be inclined to think, well, no, because they're parts of God. It's like a 3-in-1 shampoo, or, you know, or like it's an eggshell plus a yolk plus a you know, the egg white, right? But I mean, that's just a heresy that was rejected pretty early by the church. And
there's areas that it even says in Scripture, I and the Father are one, and it also says the Father is greater than me, where it's Jesus speaking. And I just, for the life of me, there is a direct contradiction. So it's not like, I mean, it's like, yeah, words don't mean words, as you say all the time. And I just couldn't agree more that, like, they can say it's an identity, you know, logic thing, but I just really thought that, you know, it's so easy to go into that, and some people are just so it's kindergartner logic.
And so the idea of partialism, that God is parts, is condemned super early in the church. It's a heresy. The idea, and people are already saying in the comments, the idea that, well, it's not that God is a parts, it's more like the phases of water. Like, but that's another heresy. That's modalism. God, because modalism couldn't be true, because then Jesus would not be praying to anybody when he was here on the earth. So in order for Jesus to be praying to somebody while he's here on the earth, there must be somebody for him to pray to. And that leads you back to the same conclusion, which is that there obviously is more than one entity.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, it's just at face value, that's what the words are saying. And yeah, it's just, I think that for me, the clearest evidence that when people are, you know, making up stuff, like if words mean something, at face value, this is, at least for me, the easiest to just point out, because, but I digress. Yeah. And I know you have other people in the queue, so thank you so much. And I wish you and your audience the best.
Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Good to hear from you, Nate.
Thank you.
Cheers, friend. The Trinity is such a fun topic. It doesn't come up in debate often enough. I used to run just a Trinity background. Maybe we'll do it again soon. Sayla, thank you for the super chat. It says, for someone who believes in a necessary being, he certainly isn't very sure what he believes in, or at least not necessarily. So good. Such a great play on words. I really appreciate that. I love a good joke. And I agree with Space Lord. He says, to prove the laws of logic would require logic. You nailed it, right? It's become circular at some point. And E-Boogie says, thank you for helping me see the not light Interesting. Can I feel like that's the contradiction? Can you see that without light? I think you need light. I could be wrong. Silatex says, an ever shrinking, vacuous, tiny spot on the unknown of the unknown in my brain is where God is hiding. Checkmate, atheist. Oh, Scylla, listen, Scylla. That is where God exists, in the vacuous parts of the brain. You are actually correct there. And Lou says, John 2:14 through 16, Mark and Luke, the temple's courtyard marketplace spread over acres and was guarded. One man alone driving merchants out is extraordinary. Yeah, so John chapter 2, also Luke chapter, I'm not Luke, I mean Matthew chapter 23. We get this crazy narrative of Jesus driving people out of the temple, which is insane. Listen, this was a large structure, hundreds and hundreds of people there keeping track of shit. The idea that this guy is just going to come on, this lonesome, and drive everybody out of the temple is absurd on his face. They would have arrested this clown, which is why the story doesn't even show up in John. The clearing of the temple shows up at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, the very beginning. In Matthew and elsewhere, it's at the end. It's like right before he dies. The only solution to this that Christians have is that, well, he cleared the temple twice. Yeah. I didn't believe that he did it once. You trying to tell me he did it twice? You're crazy. And Hola Furphy sent 10 DZ memberships. Big W, Hola. I really appreciate that. That's very generous. And Santa Park says, at least he didn't yell, stop talking over me. Happy Ascension Day, Eve, to all of us heathens. Yeah. That's going to happen. Before the night's over, there's going to be somebody literally shouting at me. That's going to be the course of events. Let me get our next guest in here. And we've got Mike with us now. How you doing, Mike?
Hello. So I wanted to ask you about what's your belief about biological sex versus gender?
Well, I debate atheism, so is that something you want to talk about?
Well, it refers to Christianity because you don't believe in that and you follow atheism, so that would refer to that because most atheists believe that there are infinite genders, so...
Well, I don't believe in infinite genders. I think you're misusing the words. Also, I don't know if you're lost, but I'm not a biologist. Did you want to talk about atheism?
Oh no, that's fine. So
you talk about your
so
deity.
The point is that there. Oh yeah, I'll talk about your morals and your beliefs. So, what genders do you believe exist?
So you're not going to actually engage in the debate. You're just going to keep.
I'm engaging. I'm asking you, what do you believe?
You're just going to keep going to transphobic arguments. So
what's transphobic? I'm asking you, what do you believe? There's no fear.
So we're talking about the existence of a God, and you're intentionally running away from it. Did you actually want to talk about the existence
God
of a God?
God is real. Yes, God is 100% real.
Cool.
And God made them male and female. So what do you believe?
So that's the topic, right? So I don't believe in God. I don't believe that God created anything. So the first question I would have then is, what would be the convincing evidence or argument that would lead one to believe in a God?
The resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Cool. I don't believe that he resurrected. So what's the evidence that he resurrected?
Okay, you don't believe it. So then what's your opinion of gender then? Because you don't believe that. What do you believe then?
I'm talking about the resurrection, right? So why would I believe that a man raised from the dead?
Because he is God in the flesh of man?
Yeah, I don't believe that to be the case, though, right? So you'd have to establish that first. Like, if you believed he was God, then yes, I can see why you would think that, well, if he is God, he could resurrect, but you haven't established that part yet.
So which part do you want me to do? Where Josephus said it, or the other scribes that said it, that recorded it at the time?
Well, Josephus didn't actually say it. We've got multiple editions of Josephus, and funny that the earliest quotations from Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 18, specifically from the early church prior to the 4th century, don't mention any of that. All of it seems to have come long after that and is preserved.
Where's the evidence for that from the scholars who research the text?
And is preserved in multiple language, and none of them actually match. Now, most scholars I know of tend to go by the Arabic version They don't typically go by the Greek version. The Greek version was the one that was kept by the early church. And the first manufacture we have of the Greek version that includes this nonsense about Josephus believing that Jesus is the Christ comes from the actual early church. It comes quite literally from the first church historian Eusebius. What it doesn't come from are actual documents from Josephus. So, again, I think that's not a great argument. And Origen himself, in like 190, 180, or the beginning of the 3rd century, about 200, writing on the topic, literally says that Josephus denied Jesus was the Christ.
Yeah, you can deny it, but it was still recorded as being true.
Well,
like you can deny something being true, but it still happens, like biological sex. How you
Origen
support, like, 3+ different
thoroughly
genders.
Origen thoroughly reads and quotes from Josephus, and he said in his reading of Josephus that Josephus did not believe that Jesus was the Christ, which is obvious because he's not a Jew. So quoting Josephus isn't a great source for determining that
the point
Jesus
with
actually
quoting
rose
Josephus
from
is
the
that
dead.
he's a source where he disagrees with the faith, yet he quotes it happening and the people saying that it happened.
That's what I'm saying. He doesn't quote that it happened. In fact, we don't even know what his original quote was, because the documents that we have of Book 18 all contradicted themselves. We've got a dozen different manuscripts, and they don't say the same thing.
Okay,
right?
And where does it say this? Where's the scholarly studies that show that they've been altered or so on?
You could just get a critical edition of the Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews. You can also look at the stymetric analysis. Stymetric analysis has determined that the language used in Book 18 in the Testimonia Flavianum is not native to the rest of Josephus's works. It's clearly an insertion. So it's not really... I have no reason to believe that Josephus inserted that or said that. But even if he did, it still doesn't prove that Jesus' resurrection from the dead, being that he wasn't there, being that he didn't actually say he resurrected from the dead, and being that resurrection accounts in the ancient world were a dime a dozen.
Okay, where's this a dime a dozen? Because you're saying they all resurrected. There's all these claims. Where are these other claims coming from, like the copycat Jesus? Where's all these
there's a
coming
bunch.
From? Because now
there's a guy named Zalmoxis, another one named Dositheus, another one named Aristeus. There's actually a woman who resurrected named Calero, and Alcestis resurrected as well. There's a bunch of people in the ancient world around Jesus' time period that were supposedly resurrected from the dead.
So let me ask you this. Do you believe Jesus Christ was a real historical figure, or do you think he was fictional?
I think he probably was a real human being, but the texts that we have about him are fiction. Like, the stuff that talks about his life is mythology.
Okay. So he's mythology, so you wouldn't quote it where people would miscribe people as being dead, but they'd be in a temporary coma, then they'd be resurrected, they'd come back to life in that way. You wouldn't think of that. Okay.
Well, I mean, if you ask the Muslims, like, they believe in swoon theory. I don't believe in swoon theory. Some people believe that his body was switched out. I don't believe in that. I think the best way to read the resurrection narrative is in line with the other texts from the time period, right? We know, for example, that grave robbers were stealing from graves, especially graves that were owned by wealthy people. If Joseph of Arimathea existed and he was wealthy, then obviously that would be a grave to target. Typically, when grave robbers robbed these graves, they took the dead bodies with them. If the bodies were alive, they would sell them as a slave. In fact, this actually happened to a young woman that is talked about in the Greek and Roman literature, where she was thought to have been dead. Her body was laid in a tomb along with a bunch of gifts and other wealth. Grave robbers came to take what was buried with her, discovered, in fact, that she wasn't completely dead, kidnapped her, took her, and then sold her as a slave elsewhere. And she was only seen again many years later, when everyone had thought that she was actually dead and then resurrected. When they discovered her, they thought that she was resurrected, and she had to tell them, no, I wasn't resurrected. I was kidnapped, and I wasn't fully dead. I came back to life. So I think probably Jesus' body was probably kidnapped, or we don't even know where his body ever was, and it was all completely fabricated. And I think there was
we do know there was a temple where his body was, and it should have been by Pontius Pilate or
no,
whoever
we have
it was,
no idea where his body
that
was
he's
laid.
getting the tomb of.
We have no idea where his body was laid.
So the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that's just fiction, not real, not based on any location?
Yep.
Okay, so that's fanfic. Okay, so since we're speaking of fanfics, what do you think about gender then? Because you keep dodging the question about gender.
I think maybe you should talk to a biologist. So I debate religion.
Okay, how about there's only male and female, and you can't answer it? Nigger, nigger, get on the boat. Nigger, nigger, row, row, row. Nigger, nigger, get out of here. Nigger, nigger, go back to Christ. Come on, do it.
You're not going to get my life taken down. I'm on YouTube. You can act like an
I'll do it.
All
Nigger,
you
nigger,
want.
nigger. Kick me off then. Answer the question. Work. Come on, say it. Male or female? Answer it.
No, I'm just going to let you make a fool of yourself. Go ahead.
That's fine. Niggers are evil. Kikes are evil. Kikes suck baby dick and murder children because that's blood libel. That's what they do. Holocaust is a lie. 6 million never happened. Come on.
Wow.
Remove me from the live. You know what I'm saying is true. That's why you can't stand it.
No, I'm just letting you make a fool of yourself right now. That's all.
Anyways, so read the 14 words. We must secure the existence of our future, or of our people and future for white children.
We're not going to do any of that.
Obviously, there's people like.
All right, well, listen, child, go back to your mommy and daddy and come back when like you're old enough that your testes have actually descended. I'm not going to entertain any more of this. And that's Christianity in a nutshell, guys. That is why we do these live streams, because that is the type of people that adhere to these dangerous, toxic religions, because that's the only thing they can find that will, quite literally, endorse such behaviors. Anyways. He couldn't actually stand topic, couldn't defend his views. Actually, he's come up before. I recognize his voice. He's come up before demanding that I debate him on the trans topic, and it always ends the same way. I don't know why he thinks that he's somehow gonna goad me into getting off topic. Anyways, we'll move on to the next one. Let me grab a couple super chats. Hold on. Johanna says, a unicorn stuffy is the perfect gift for Christian parents to give their child. It's as far-fetched as their holy book. You nailed it, actually. I still want to make a plushie of the life-granting unicorn. I need to make this happen. It needs to be a thing. And Bryce, thank you for the super chat, says, assuming that the universe is orderly is an example of pattern-seeking brains counting the hits and ignoring the misses, and also narcissism. That's a good point. We talk about pareidolia quite often when these arguments come up. And I agree with you, Bryce. It's this, we're so programmed to seek the patterns that we see them even when they don't exist. And Bryce, again, thank you so much. Says, I'm glad that Miles dropped the Philbro routine and started having a real conversation. I was actually a little bit shocked. I was curious if he was going to Philbro the whole time because, Philbro's going to Philbro. But he came around and we ended up having a decent conversation. I think that goes to show that sometimes you just got to get over the nonsense and let them know that you're not going to, engage in the nonsense, and they'll come back to sanity. But it doesn't work for everybody. And a big W, Salem, for the 1999 super chat. In fact, it's so big. 1 second, it's slightly cut off on my screen. There we go. It says, do the people realize that Christianity is younger than human civilization? I think they do. It says, do they think humans had no morals until 2,000 years ago? That's where they differ. It says, where do Christians think they got their morals from? Older religions and atheism. Holy rock. So you're 100% right, Selah, because most of the laws that you have in the Hebrew Bible and even in the New Testament, they all exist outside of the Bible. I can find them elsewhere. In fact, most of the 10 Commandments, not all of them, obviously, are directly paralleled in the 42 confessions of Ma'at from Egypt. And I know there are some apologists saying, no, they weren't. They absolutely were. I'm more than glad to show you where they are. Johanna, thank you for the super chat. It says, why can't believers realize that atheists are more morally developed human beings? I guess they have no sense of wrong and right without someone finding the answer in their horribly immoral book. Yeah, that's the case, right? Because the general belief is like you can't be moral unless a God is telling you that you need to be moral. But that tells me that you're dangerous. Like if you can't be moral without God telling you to be, then you're a dangerous individual. And Solar says 5 billion years, sun will explode. I thought it was 1 billion. Oh, expand. I thought it was 1 billion. I could be wrong, but it says 5 billion years, sun will expand and engulf Mercury, Venus, and maybe Earth. 1 billion years, sun will heat up enough to evaporate the oceans and end life on Earth. Correcting as an astronomy nerd, that's probably more like it. That's a good correction, actually. I think you're right. It's not that it's going to swallow up the Earth. It's just going to end life on Earth. Eventually, it will swallow life on Earth, or it's going to swallow up the Earth. Just not in a billion years. I appreciate the correction. I really do. I appreciate that. And Discordia friend, thank you so much for the super chat. Says this Philbro isn't so bad, but why do they always talk so fast? Are they using a technique of dazzle them with bullshit? Yeah. So you guys probably know the old saying. What was it? It's similar to dazzle them with bullshit, but it rolls off the tongue better. What was it called? It's not actually coming to me. Maybe I'll Google it. It was a good saying. What was it? Yeah, dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. That's the one I was thinking of. Dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. Yeah, there's a lot of baffling with bullshit happening out here. That's just the facts of the matter. Let me grab like 2 more super chat friends, and we'll grab our next guest. Retired bomb tech, big W. Thank you for the $20 super chat. It says retired from the military after 20 years. Thank you for serving, by the way. Your show is one of the few things in the civilian world that keeps me sane. Your humor reminds me a little of the military. Here's some cash for your cooking fun, partner. Well, thank you so much, retired bomb tech. And thank you for serving. Listen, that's a difficult thing to do. I've got family that are in the service. And listen, you're doing things that a lot of normal people aren't willing to do. You've already done them. So thank you so much for serving. And thank you for watching and supporting the channel. And last one for now, Matt Vernon, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. It says, isn't it problematic for the Jesus was God theory that Jesus didn't appear to know that the major stories of the Exodus and invasion of Canaan were untrue? It seems like something he should have known. Maybe. I'm in complete agreement with you, right? This idea that Jesus flubs on the Old Testament all the time is deeply problematic for me, at least. It's super big problem, and we talk about Psalm 110 a lot on this particular issue. Let me get our next guest in from the queue. And Vic, thank you so much for the $20 super thanks. I super appreciate that. Is deeply problematic for me, at least. It's super. Prophet Denia, why are you feeding my stream into your microphone? What's happening? Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna drop this. I don't know what's going on with this person. All right, and we'll move on to the next one. Vic, bravo to you for supporting the channel. I really appreciate that, friend. All right. And we're going to get, looks like Kaysen in here, although Kaysen looks like they might have disconnected, or maybe they need to refresh the browser. Kaysen, can you hear me? Kaysen? Bueller? Anybody? Okay. Kaysen not actually with us. We'll move on to the next one. Looks like we've got Thrak.
Kaysen in here, although Kaysen looks like they might have disconnected, or maybe they need to refresh the browser. Kaysen, can you hear me?
Thrak, I don't know what's going on with your audio setup. Do you have a microphone you can plug in?
Bueller? Anybody? Not actually with us. We'll move on to the next one.
All right. Well, Thrak's not fully connected. We'll keep going. Looks like we've got joining us now Rat. Rat, can you hear me? Rat? 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 Your connection is good.
Yeah.
I can
Hey. Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, it looks like your microphone's turned on. How you doing, Rat?
Yeah. I just switched over to my. Hold on a second. I just switched over to my Bluetooth headpiece. Sorry about that. No, I'm good. Hey, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you for asking. Rat, are you at least 18 and are you a believer?
I am at least 18 and I am a believer.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm a believer.
All right. And which God do you believe in?
I believe in the Father. At least the one that Jesus proclaims.
Gotcha. So you're a Christian.
Yeah. I'll
Cool.
take that title for lack of a better use, but some people here in the calls are really making me wish for a better title.
Trust me, I get that. I get that. So what'd be the best evidence or argument for the Christian God being real?
That's a great question, and I've been thinking about it. The best evidence I got is just purely anecdotal. Just stuff that's occurred in my life that makes me point towards something outside of at least the tangible.
Would you accept that for somebody of another religion?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I'll give you an example because like when I was a young apologist, I was engaging, I thought that miracles and testimonies of miracles were super powerful for Christianity. So I started talking to Muslims and whatnot on the other side of the world back when the internet was still new, asking about, you know, why they believe in their religion. And I came to discover that they had just the same types of testimonies and miracles that I had, which led me then to the conclusion, obviously, that maybe those aren't the best evidences.
Oh, sure. I don't necessarily deny that the Muslims do believe in a God that is influential and affecting this realm. If that makes sense.
But what I'm suggesting is that if the Muslims are reporting the same types of stories as the Christians, then either both of them are right or both of them are wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. If what I experience is similar to someone in a different faith, 100%. Yeah. Right. They're both right or both wrong.
Right, exactly. So from my point of view, if I took your personal story to be serious proof, then I'd have to take everybody else's, and then I'd end up being, you know, polytheistic. I'd believe in all the gods.
I would never ask you to take my personal stories as proof. It's a personal story. It's purely on me.
Sure. Okay. Well, then, you know, from my point of view, you know, if you don't have anything other than anecdote, I'm not sure there's much for us to cover because I don't think anecdotes are helpful.
Yeah, 100%. I get that totally. And I guess the topic of the broadcast is my God is imaginary, or your God is imaginary. Prove me wrong, right? And I really don't know how I could prove you wrong, given that the amount of evidence I would have to bring to the table, well, beyond my personal beliefs, is easily easily construed as like a natural or like this is just our experience. I'm bad with words. You have to understand.
No, I agree with you. So basically, when I was a young Christian, I had one of my religion teachers in Catholic school tell me, we were talking about the Bible, and some difficult questions came up, and she said, at the end of the day, you know, what we believe is a faith and not a fact, and you can't prove it to people. And so, I mean, I appreciate that it seems like you've come to that realization. The reality is, though, most Christians don't believe that. Most Christians believe that it's a fact and that I'm the dummy for not believing it. So that's kind of why we do these live streams.
Oh, yeah, totally. I just want, well, the main reason why I'm calling, and I apologize ahead of time, I'm driving along the 70, so if my connection cuts out, we cut out, but I'm mostly calling in because I have a buddy who's a big fan of your show. Hey, Adam, and we have a lot of in-depth discussions about religion and super low-level philosophy. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a super deep thinker. I'm trying to do super deep critical thinking now, but like I haven't been for the vast majority of my life. And so he wanted me to call in and have a chat with you and discuss some of the things that we talked about. And it's just that's mostly why I'm calling in. I wanted to talk about the fact that, well, not the fact that, well, my opinion is that Jesus, if we're to take the Bible story at its face, the Old Testament deity, Yahweh, is not the deity that Jesus professed in the New Testament.
Sounds like you're not a Christian.
That's why I don't want to. That's why I'll accept the title, but I don't really want, because I don't believe in the Trinity, and I don't worship Yahweh, a deceitful, the father of lies, as Jesus proclaimed him to be, and that's where I'm at.
Interesting. So all right. So you believe maybe in line with some of the Gnostics, perhaps. And
I've been trying to avoid falling into the Gnostic rabbit hole, but it's like I'm like treading over the edge, and I see it, and it's scary.
Right, yeah. And so you might fall into like adoptionism, where Jesus wasn't the Son of God, like actually, but was more like an adopted Son of God. Is that kind of where you're at?
That's harder to say. I guess you could probably more bunch me in with Gnostic traditions. So it's like the Yahweh being the demiurge or something along those lines. That's a little closer to what I think. I do think that there is a like a hierarchy to the spiritual realm, if for lack of a better term. Like there is like a supreme, and then there are lower rank entities. I would consider Yahweh and Jesus among those lower rank entities, not the same as the supreme, but still like they would refer to him as the Father, that sort of thing.
Sure. So do you believe the Bible's true?
No, I think there's a lot of, well, I mean, there are like broad stroke stuff is kind of true, but there are a lot of lies and deceits, and people have used the Bible in their own quest for powers throughout the years, like the Deuteronomists, and like reconstructing the Torah to fit their like political motives, and then of course like the Catholic Church adding in verses and taking away sections of the New Testament to fit their political and power grabbing motivations and such like that. So the Bible is, as it's a text, it is a collection of books that we have to read and critically think about. As far as its truths, as far as we can verify, and as far as we can verify is again writings of a certain perspective, a certain bias. Like we get the Old Testament, but it's all written from a bias of Moses or whoever wrote the Torah.
Is the Bible superior to the Iliad, right? And the Odyssey?
Say it again.
Is the Bible superior to the Iliad and Odyssey?
Oh, to the Iliad and Odyssey? Yeah. It's a cooler story, I think. But Iliad and Odyssey are very cool stories, I will say that much.
But is the Bible more true? Is it truthier?
Truthier? I mean, that's my belief, yes.
Okay. What makes the Bible more truthier than the writings of Homer?
The the Bible truthier than the writings of Homer? That's a great question. Well, unfortunately, there's so much like inconsistency in terms of like historical events as far as we can verify and what's written in the Old Testament. And even so, with the New Testament, we do have a general outline of what happened with the apostles directly after Jesus. But again, it's only as verified as we have historical evidence and records of, right? So, what makes it truthier is I mean, it's not much of an evidence so much as it's like so many people believe it, and it's lasted for so long. So on that grounds, it's a little bit truthier. Like you don't find people preaching Homer or preaching the Iliad today. There might be some, but like there's a lot more like influence of the Bible, and I would guess that would be the metric in which I would weigh the truthierness of the Bible.
If and when Islam replaces Christianity as the world's most abundant religion, would that mean that the Quran is truthier than the Bible?
I don't necessarily think either of them are not truthy. Does that make sense? I like the Quran still like. I think it's the same entity. Honestly, I think it's all Yahwehism. It's all Saturnian worship.
But the difference is that Allah doesn't believe that Jesus died for your sins, or that he's the Son of God, or that God can even have a son. Certainly doesn't believe in multiple deities. He wants to give you 70 virgins if you sacrifice your life for the cause of Allah. That you'll be swimming in rivers of milk in the afterlife. I think they're pretty different conceptions of God, right?
They are pretty different conceptions of God. Now, I will definitely give you that much. That's why I think the version that Islam teaches is more closely related to the version that the Old Testament teaches. This horrible, awful deity that sends his army to massacre people and enforces rape marriage and enforces the stoning of homos and the stoning of like unfaithful women and stuff like that. It aligns more with the Old Testament deity,
right? So
than what I would see in the New Testament, who is the Father who Jesus talks about is loving, is faithful, keeps his promises, would not send snakes to those who ask for bread.
But he does in Numbers. When the Israelites cry out in the wilderness for bread, God sends wild snakes.
Which is exactly why I brought that point up. I don't think Yahweh is the Father that Jesus preaches about.
Right. So let me ask you a question. It sounds to me like you probably have a Christian background and you're realizing some of the absurdities in the Bible, and therefore you're kind of
Baptist, charismatic, born into a charismatic megachurch and raised Baptist from when I was like 8.
Right. So you're seeing the problems with some of the Bible, and you're reconstructing a faith that seems to line up with your understanding of the Bible. What I'm trying to figure out is, once you've seen all the problems with the Bible, you've seen the God who says genocide's cool, rape is fine, different things like that. At that point, why are you trying to reconstruct a faith that includes the Bible, as opposed to just say, oh, this book's fiction and it's bullshit, and invent something different that doesn't need the Bible to be true?
And the only thing I could give you is, again, personal anecdote, like events that happened to me that directly correspond with Jesus, and that's all I can do. Like I can't, like I can give up on the Bible, but it wouldn't change the events that happened in my life. I'm kind of in that tricky position here, and I understand that, like, what I'm saying is completely heretical to the core. Like, I'm not at this point. I'm not part of the Christian religion because it's my beliefs are so counter to like Christian industrial American
That's for
Christian
sure.
industrial beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Like I think most of them are worshiping Yahweh. They do want to instate the law of sin and death. You know, they want that law back because it's what gives them power, what gives them control. But like that's counter to what I think the New Testament's about. You know, it's like freedom from the law because the law is law of sin and death. And then like being released from the law gives you freedom to be better than what the law held for us. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Well, I mean,
I know
you
what
don't
you're
have to agree,
saying.
but
I don't think it's
yeah.
sensible. But that being said,
That's fine.
all right. So let's try to circle the wagons here. Okay. So
all right.
you don't really believe in the Bible's truthfulness. You don't really believe in how the New Testament understands the Old Testament. You don't really even believe in some of the words of Jesus, apparently. And so it seems to me the only thing
Like
that's
in what way?
we'll get there.
Like,
It seems to me that the thing that's keeping you in this whole Bible-based religion is this idea that you had an experience with Jesus or with a God that you associate with Jesus, and so that's fine.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and I've heard these. I've heard this before. And in fact, when I was a believer, I would have said something similar. And here's kind of why I think these types of arguments are not great, because, and it's not an argument, but this is why this is not a great route to go down, right? So because if you believe that you have like the God that you're talking about has appeared to you or made himself known to you or herself, and has somehow intervened in your life in some way, right? This is problematic to me that we would believe in a God that would intervene in like rather mundane details, which is usually how these stories turn out, like rather mundane interventions that could be better explained by psychology, but then he won't intervene when there's 3 million children dying of starvation and literally just a loaf of bread would keep them alive for another week. So like it's weird to me that like a God would be concerned with the little tiny affairs of our first world problems, but then choose not to intervene in all the horrific stuff that's going on every second of every day.
Yeah, it does suck. Yeah.
Yeah.
So only thing I can say in response to that is I'm stupid. So I'm kind of retarded. So I do what I can with what I'm working with.
I don't think you're stupid. I think you had an experience and it was convincing to you.
Well, yeah, no, I do think that as far as the New Testament's clear. All right, so the Old Testament sets up the story of this deity masking this Canaanite deity, right? This Yahweh or Yadabo or whatever you want to call him, masking himself as the God of this world, taking the spot of the Most High. He curses the land, and we know the Garden of Eden's a whole thing in of itself. Like the liar in the garden is not the snake, is not Adam or Eve. It is Yahweh in the garden that lies, and so he curses the land, he curses earth, and then
so the God of the Old Testament is evil.
The God of the Old Testament is evil.
Okay.
And
now, is the God of the Old Testament the God of everything? Did he create all things?
No.
Who did?
I believe it was a council of deities. We got like the general term we have is Elohim, and we don't really know if that's a singular or a plural. Whatever the creation element was it? I believe it was a council of deities known as the Divine Council is referred to in Deuteronomy 32. It's referred to in Psalms chapter 82. A few other places in the Bible. It's this divine counsel.
Right. And why would you believe that they were the ones that created everything?
Well, it's just fun to believe.
Sure, right? But the Bible
Yeah.
says that Yahweh created everything.
Well, no, Yahweh didn't start working on anything till Genesis chapter 2, verse 4.
Well, no, I disagree. I think Yahweh in the Old Testament is conflated with El Elyon.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're. Yeah. Okay. No, that's.
So the
I
reason
see
why
that.
So the reason why Genesis 1 refers to Elohim creating and Genesis 2 refers to Yahweh creating is because they came from two different editors. And so
Yeah.
how familiar are you with the documentary hypothesis?
Not at all. What is this?
Okay. So there's a theory referred to as documentary hypothesis. There's multiple versions of it. You can do like the supplementarian hypothesis or the fragmentary hypothesis, but they're all referring to the same thing, which is that we have different narratives that were at some point stitched together by editors. And we can, in fact, if you read the writings of like Julian Wellhausen or Cassuto, or more recently Richard Elliott Freeman or Joel Baden, we can tell where these sources are based on the language that they're using and how the texts are written. And so what happened is the North and the South had different traditions. The Judeans and the Israelites were once different people. The Judeans worshipped Yahweh, and the northern tribes worshipped El, also referred to as Elohim, which is a concrete abstraction of the Hebrew named El. So what happened was they had to combine their cultural and religious heritage at some point, probably initially through the United Monarchy of David, and then again after the Assyrian invasion that decimated the 10 tribes of the north, and all their priests had to go south into Judea. So what they did is they took these separate narratives and they stitched them together into one meta-narrative and said, look, we're actually the same people that worship the same God. We should be unified. So what we have then is a composite text from two different regions, from two different actual people groups that are attempting to be conflated together. And that's why we have what seems to be two different gods in the Old Testament, is because originally they were two different gods. The problem is that the Bible has been so heavily edited that if you read all of the Hebrew Bible, it's clear that they want you to believe, and they're telling you that Elohim and Yahweh are the same deity. There's a number of passages that clearly state this. You just have to read enough of it to stumble upon them.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that's like the vast majority opinion of the Bible is that that most believe that Yahweh is El or Elyon, right? I think that's the vast majority opinion. It's really only just I don't think I agree with a vast majority of people who believe the Bible.
Yeah. So, anyways, my point is, like, when we get to the point where the Bible is so fragmented that either A, you have to invent, multiple characters, or B, you have to take multiple characters and smush them into one. At some point, we should probably just come to the agreement that it's all fiction and it's not true. If it was true, we wouldn't have to, we wouldn't be finding these competing deities in the text. We would expect that it's unified, but we know that it's not unified because if we actually do the research on the source criticism, it's obvious that these are different texts that were later compiled together, making it to look like it's one unified text.
Fair enough. Yeah, I can go along with that. I still don't know if that like undoes the work that the New Testament kind of gives us, like this Jesus character going through and saying, "Hey, actually, no, this law sucks. Just be a good person."
Well, he didn't say that.
Type of thing. Well, no, he doesn't say that literally. Like he says, love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law is summed up on those two principles, right?
Yeah, Jesus was a Judaizer. Jesus said that
sure.
whoever follows the law will be great in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever doesn't follow the law and teaches others not to follow the law will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus was definitely pro-law of Moses.
Yeah. It wasn't until like Paul expanded upon that, and John, and a little bit James, but not so much.
Yeah. So anyways, I mean, your position is deeply interesting, but I need someone who can come up and will have a debate with me.
Yeah, fair enough. Totally understand.
But I appreciate you having a chat with me. I was intrigued by your position to kind of see where you're coming with some of these opinions, because like the Gnostics weren't crazy. Like there's a reason why they came to some of their conclusions. We don't get them too often on the live stream, but we appreciate you coming up.
All right. Well, thanks. I'm glad to have talked with you. Again, have a good night. Hope you catch some good ones.
Absolutely. Drive safe.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. And friends, just a short reminder: do not drive in live. That is dangerous. That's how you get hurt. We were talking to someone a couple months ago that literally hit a curb while talking to me, and I said, "That's why you don't drive in live." That's why. All right, let's grab a couple of super chats. TM says Calvin burned Severus alive for denying Trinity. Yeah, over in Geneva, right? This idea that only the Catholics were killing each other is not actually true. It's not. Henry, thank you for the super chat. Says Mark 10:18 kills the Trinity. There's a couple passages I think that kill the Trinity. I think the fact when he says the Father is greater than I think that's a crazy thing to say when you're also suggesting that somehow you're equal, which he does doesn't say that. But to your point, Mark 10:18 is when Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." That's a crazy thing to say if Jesus is actually God. And Josh says, "Guest is out the gate a dumbass." I think you're referring to the prior one that tried to get my live taken down, and I agree with you, Josh. Patty, thank you so much for the $10 super thanks. I really appreciate that. And Stargate Master, thank you for the super chat. Says that was very impressive. Anyone else I've watched would have lost it on that kid. Way to show the perfect juxtaposition between us and them. That's the point, Stargate. Thank you for the super chat, though. But like, listen, when these people come up here spewing their hate, like it shouldn't have to rattle us. Like we're the ones standing on firm ground here, the ground of Doug, to be precise, right? So like when they come up here and they embarrass themselves by acting like that, just let them do it. Let them make fools of themselves. Saint Brush, Big W for the 666, Hail Satan, says Saint Peter is the first vicar of Stone Doug, but the Roman Church, obviously he was, has censored this Siliconian truth. Absolutely. It's written in the letters of Pope Clement. 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. That's why there were so many Pope Cements. The L, the spelling Clement is spurious. It's a formality. They're all Pope Cements, except for some of the bad ones. Thank you for the super chat, though. That was pretty good, Saint Brush. Mr. D says, you should have told that guy that God was trans. Oh my gosh. I haven't done that argument in so long. But you're right. The kid who was dying to debate the trans topic, I 1,000,000% should have said the God of the Bible is trans. And I've got a dynamite argument for that. It's just true. It's just logically, factually true that the God of the Bible is trans. That's all there is to it. Nathaniel, thank you for the $10 super chat. It says, hello, Justin. Definitely not bribing you, but is there a way to see the queue? I would love to debate you, but it's kind of 4 a.m. here. I think you mean to jump ahead in the queue. I mean, if you're in here, oh, you must be Nate. Nate, I thought there's a Nate in the queue, but I assumed it was the Nate that I just talked to because it came up at the same time. And sometimes when I talk to somebody and they drop out and they have a bad connection, it'll show that they're hanging around in the queue, even though they're not hanging around in the queue, and it looks exactly like what you're showing up as. So I apologize, Nate. I can pull you in, not a problem. I didn't actually think you were there. I thought that was an artifact from the prior Nate. So I'll grab you, Nate. Don't worry. And 9040, Big W, thank you for the $10 super chat. Thank you for being my #1 fan. And also Patrick, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Says, love your content and the broad strokes. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate the generous support. And thanks for watching. Thanks for liking. Thanks for sharing. All right, let me get Nate in here. How you doing, Nate?
Hello. Can you hear me, Justin?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry you've been waiting for a little bit.
No, that's completely fine. I knew there was another Nate, but I didn't know if rejoining would put me into the back of the queue. And it's still 3 a.m.
It might have. Don't worry. I totally get it. And I've been there before, late nights, barely hanging on. So, Nate, what's your background? Are you a believer?
I am a former Seventh-day Adventist. I was born and raised in that church and in a very small country, so my name is really easily. Anyhow, my grandpa was a pastor, so you must understand. I have heard all the talking points. The Bible is the book I have read the most in my life, even if I do not believe a single word of it. But being raised a Seventh-day Adventist, kinda, and in a fully Christian family, kinda forces you into believing a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, it primes you to accept things that you wouldn't normally accept. But it sounds like you're left. You're no longer a Christian.
Yes, but I have a lot of questions of the scripture, and I would love to put an end to my cognitive dissonance, you have called it.
Sure, yeah. What's the situation?
The Bible, for example, you've talked about the Trinity, and you said you have gone on this topic a lot. But I have a couple of verses, for example, Psalm 33:6, Isaiah 61:1, and Proverbs 9:1 that talk about God's word, God's spirit, and God's wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know how these do not relate to the Trinity. At least if you take at face value everything else the Bible has to say.
Yeah, so you're kind of doing what Philo did. So Philo of Alexandria had this general principle, and it shows up in the Psalms as well with Lady Wisdom. Had this idea that like these characteristics of God can be personified, but in the Proverbs, it's not a literal entity with thinking capacity. It's a metaphorical entity, right? And Philo did the same thing. But like, so we had this idea that like this entity, the Word of God, became flesh, and that's Jesus, right? To me, this is the Bible that's taking something that's clearly like an artistic rendering of an idea and creating a literal case of it. And I just don't really think that is the way the original texts were meant to be in the Old Testament. I don't think that like I don't believe that like the characteristics of God could or were thought to have taken on their own life force.
Okay, I understand. So it's just a fundamental misreading of the actual text in your view.
I don't know if it's a misreading. I think the question we have to ask ourselves
Misinterpretation,
is,
I mean.
yeah, it's a different interpretation. Like, so when we hear about Sophia, Lady Wisdom,
Yeah.
are we suggesting that there's an actual thinking entity, like wisdom is somehow embodied as a thinking entity, or is this more like a metaphor, like for example in Isaiah, when the nation of Israel is personified as a single person? Well, the nation of Israel clearly is not a single person. So like
Yeah.
it seems to be like taking something that is a little bit abstract and then personifying it as an individual is kind of a helpful analogy for explaining how it works. But I don't know if I would read that and take that to be a literal situation where it's saying that there's an actual personification of wisdom that is sentient.
Okay. I completely understand your point. I've heard you make this argument a lot still about the Trinity, that I guess my issue with some of the points you've brought up is that at least my Seventh-day Adventists in where I'm from believe that it's a stupid analogy, but God is like an egg, right? You have yolk, you have the shell, you have the white, the egg white, and I guess the Trinity would make sense in a way that the same way that the egg, the yolk, and the shell are an egg, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit would be God, the entity that we would call God.
Right. So then I think the problem you have there is, I think you're probably okay because you're a Seventh-day Adventist, but you have to be okay with the heresy of partialism. If you're okay with the heresy of partialism, we can probably move beyond that. But
no, I am completely not okay with any of this, right? As I said, former Seventh-day Adventist. I'm just bringing up the talking points that I haven't necessarily heard you talking about, or at least I haven't found them.
Yeah, because the problem with partialism is it denies the idea that Jesus is 100% God, and that God is 100% God, and that the Holy Spirit is 100% God. And so in Christianity, for the Trinity to work out, you need to have this idea that Jesus is 100% God and 100% man. But if you go to partialism, then you're suggesting that, well, he's only part God. He's only part of the thing that makes him God, which means he's not actually God on his own. He's only part of God.
Okay.
So what you could say is kind of like saying, I am Justin. Everything that makes me, I'm a person, I am Justin, right? Now,
yes.
My arm is a part of me, but my arm is not Justin. My arm is a part of me, but my arm is not a person or a human. It's just a part of something, right? So when we talk about God, typically God doesn't have parts. God is completely whole. So
yeah, but it's what I guess the Adventists would call him triune, right? He's all, but he's total in his partiality, the same way that your arm is no less of a part of you than your leg is. That's not my analogy, obviously.
Right. But if God is the whole, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The part is not the whole, right? So it wouldn't be proper if Jesus is a part of God, then you couldn't say that Jesus is God, because he's not God, he's only part of God. It's the same way that my arm might be a part of me, my arm is not me. So you couldn't say that my arm is Justin, you would say my arm is part of Justin. So when we talk about God, if we truly believe that Jesus is God, like he is identified as God, then you can't say that he is just a part of God, because being a part of God, it means that you're not actually identified being equal with God, because God is the whole, not the part.
Okay, I completely agree. I see clearly where the analogy falls apart, but I guess just hearing it repeated so many times over, I guess, kind of molds you into believing things that not even the Bible believes in.
Right. And so
Yeah.
the early church fathers did talk about partialism quite a bit. And in fact, the way I worded it is pretty weak. There's some really good arguments against partialism in the early church. If you really want to check them out,
Yeah, I do.
shoot me a DM on the Discord. I'll send you some of the early church refutations on partialism.
Okay, I will. You were saying early refutations on partialism. Okay. Something that I would also wanna hear you talk about is about the great controversy, or at least what the Seventh Day Adventists call it. And in their view, obviously, God is all just, God is all right, and everything evil comes from Satan. All evil, all sin, all everything that is wrong with nature, everything that it goes wrong in our personal lives is fruits of our sin, and that sin began in the Garden of Eden. I've heard you talk about this, specifically the myth of creation before, the origins of it, and I guess my issue is that this claim is unfalsifiable, right? That God is just and all evil comes from Satan. I guess it's just I don't know what the logical fallacy is, but begging the question, maybe that's something.
Well, maybe, and I think the problem is if you're talking to a Christian and they're talking about like the origin of evil and things like that, make them root it in the Bible, because in the Bible it doesn't say that all evil and all pain and suffering comes from the devil. That seems to not be there at all. In fact, Satan can literally only do what God allows him to do. In the book of Job, we see that. In the book of Job, God grants him permission to do the horrific stuff that happens to Job. In the New Testament, even Jesus says that Satan has requested to sift you. So like this idea that all the bad stuff comes from Satan isn't true according to the Bible. The bad stuff that Satan does is sanctioned by God. God allows him to do it.
I completely agree. From all the reading I've seen, I've done with the Bible, I couldn't find much evidence that all evil comes from Satan specifically, and I guess this is a lot of I say our beliefs, but my previous religion's belief was that based in a lot of I don't want to call it biblical fan fiction, but if you're familiar with the Seventh Day Adventists and Dante's Inferno, you'll see a lot of parallels. But I guess my point is Satan, God would allow Satan to do all these things in the Seventh Day Adventist view, because God wants to prove in a way to everybody else that He is just and that He gave us free will to reign over ourselves the same way He allows the devil to show us that everything is and is evil, and he's directly opposed to God.
Why does he need to prove it?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Right. It's kind of a silly thing that a perfect deity would even have the desire to prove anything. Like he wouldn't have to prove it. He could just communicate it perfectly to everybody, just using telepathy.
Yeah, but I guess if you are God and you create angels and you create Satan, it's like having a kid. I guess that's not a good analogy. God doesn't have to prove anything to anybody, but if he is good, he would allow Satan to happen in spite of knowing that he would oppose directly to him. I guess this is the talking point.
Right, but I think the talking point that you were starting with was that God is doing this to prove to people, right? So, but if God was doing something to prove to people, it seems like he's taking the most long, arduous, beaten path around the bend that he could find, when he could just snap his fingers and we will all know, using whatever magical powers he has. He doesn't have to do this long, weird, drawn out, battle with Satan or battle with evil or anything.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Again, this was a lot of cognitive dissonance growing up, believing both that God is all just and all powerful, but he also couldn't stop an angel from doing infinite atrocities against humanity. So,
right.
Yeah.
And he created that angel, and he's all knowing, he knew everything that Satan was going to do before Satan did it. Which means God's responsible for all the stuff that Satan did.
Yeah, I completely agree. The God of the Old Testament is an evil God. I have literally no argument against that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. If he exists, he's evil, that's for sure.
Exactly. And for example, the guy, if you remember Mike, he was shouting some unpleasant things. And if that's the God Mike actually believes in, which I believe he was just a troll, but if that's the God he believes in, I want nothing to do with him.
Yeah, could you imagine saying that kind of nonsense in public, thinking that God's going to be proud of you? It's the most insane thing in the world. That's an even crazier God than the God that's in this book.
Yeah, completely agree. Again, I genuinely hope he doesn't hold any of the beliefs he said he does, or else I would be very, very worried for him. But
yeah, for sure.
Again, I'm considering all these points because I've heard all these talking points, and I realize how insane this sound. But I do still have questions.
Yeah, well, listen, join up our Discord, and you can chat with me and others in Discord. There's a lot of people there that are quite knowledgeable and have would probably love to have some discussion on some of these topics. But I've got probably enough time to get one more good debate in, so I'm going to try to find someone to debate me.
You can, of course.
All right, cheers, friend. Thank you so much. Good to hear from you, Nate.
All right, take care.
Big W. Yeah, leaving the Seventh-day Adventists is hard. They really believe that they've got it all figured out. I've got a brother that's stuck in the Seventh-day Adventists, and he just thinks all the other Christians are dumb. They're the only ones who got it figured out. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, gee, I wasn't going to give my heart to Jesus today, but after listening to Phil Bro Diarrhea, I think I will. Isn't that crazy? I'm so sorry I got this many super chats backed up. I apologize. I've tried. You guys know me. I try to read every super chat that comes through because, I love you guys. You're my supporters. You're the reason why this channel exists. But, sometimes I get so many that it just get backed up. Bryce says, the enemy within transporter accident equals 2 Kirks. I'm afraid I don't know what that means again, Bryce. I know that makes a lot of sense to you, but I have no idea what that means. I don't know what transporter accident means, and I don't know what 2 Kirks mean. Snorted rock, now I'm permanently rock hard for Doug. Listen, Doug's here for it. Get stoned for the stone, all right, friends? And TM says, religion really does a number on people's minds and hearts. It's sad. That's the whole reason why we're here. That's the whole point of doing these debates. Johanna, thank you for the super chat. It says, evolution is logical, observable, and quite easy to understand. Religious books, never mind. I'm with you. If you just look at the evidence for evolution, I just think it's really compelling. I used to not believe in it as a youngster, not fully. Then I looked at the evidence and I was convinced. I mean, just got to look at it. Satan says, hi, Justin. Your live is better than any TV show. Any TV show. Listen, I really appreciate that, Satan. Those are really fine words coming from you. Appreciate the vote of support from the Dark Lord. Big W. And Beethoven is God. Interesting name. And thank you for the 666 because I'm a brand new member. I'm also proud to support a channel that brings a sense of reason and rationality to the world. Praise Doug and Beethoven. Listen, I like me some Beethoven. I've never thought of Beethoven as a god, but I might consider it now that you've brought it to the forefront. And Silitax says, when did Doug first appear on your live? A couple months ago, there's a video that you can watch about Doug. I think it's the title is like Doug. It's a scoreboard. Doug 100, Jesus 0. I think that's the episode condensed down a little bit where I first introduced Doug. It was a wild episode. I never imagined it would turn out to what it is. And ZM says, I love when Doug is mentioned in other comment sections. Those outside the deacon zone must be thinking, to quote the prophet Hadassah, who is Doug? This is crazy. I'll come into like the live stream on like AXP or The Line or somebody else, and I'll just say something in the chat, and all of a sudden it explodes with like, hail Doug. Doug is a force of nature, obviously, because he is nature. And Josh says, I like Judy. I prefer her take more than Theus. Her take more than Theus. Yeah, I agree. And she was sweet. I didn't want to debate her. She was a nice lady. Let her have it. You know what I mean? And Silotex says, I can hear Christians saying Judy is being punished for her atheism. What a sweetheart she is. She really was a sweetheart. Really was. Beandog says, are we doing Kraken? How late we going? Well, I'm going for like another 45 minutes. I can't do any Kraken. I've got to wake up super early in the morning and go to work, which is that's why the live stream started late as well, because I was at work. So unfortunately, I can't stay up late. D-Bone, thank you for the super chat, says, what's the deal with all the drama in the atheist community? Derek at MythVision had a video about people I've never heard of last week. So there's been some stuff happening with my friend Derek at MythVision, and it pains me that the community is kind of divided and fighting. This is one of the reasons why I don't do a lot of politics unless it's like a pet issue, is because people get really bent out of shape over politics, and you'd be surprised how many atheists disagree on politics. I don't want to get distracted. I don't want people to get distracted from the cause of atheism by dumb political movements. That being said, that seems to be what happened with Derek. Derek is starting to get caught up in some political backlash for doing videos with Bob Price. I still don't know the issue with Bob Price. I know that some people are upset with him. I don't actually know why. I've asked a couple people. I haven't really got a lot of explanations. I've gotten accusations. I don't know if any of them are true. So I reserve judgment. I'm kind of on the outside of this issue looking in. I don't really know what happened. I wasn't there. What I do know is that I've watched Derek's channel for quite a bit. He's a great guy. That's all I can really say about that. The people that might be disagreeing with him on this matter, I know them personally too, and they're great as well. The problem with these issues is I don't think that there's necessarily a bad actor here. I think there's an honest disagreement on where certain principles lie, and where the boundaries of our community happen to be. And I think we're kind of fighting that out in real time by us. I mean, not me, mostly other people in the community. People who know me and have been around my channel know well that I support as many people as humanly possible. I have a very broad tent. I will talk to people that disagree with me on topics. I draw the line when people say things or are advocating for dangerous or hurtful positions. If I see someone that's advocating for a position that is simply hurtful to the trans community or to the LGBTQ community or to an ethnic group or a marginalized community of any nature, I'm going to stand up for those people, and I'm going to protect them to the best of my ability. I can't protect people from bad ideas. Sometimes you have to get the bad ideas out in the open and discuss them. You can't just cancel people because of them. but there are occasions in which sometimes people say they say too many things, and you said, listen, I don't know if this person belongs in my community. And so that's kind of a vague answer to what's happening with Derek right now. As an outsider myself, looking at what's happening, who loves Derek and loves a lot of people involved in the whole situation, to me, it's sad to watch the community fight with each other. But anyways, that being said, I will continue to support people in my community and people in other communities as long as those communities are not being harmful to each other. And then I have to play referee a little bit. So I probably can't give you any more information than that. You'll have to do a little research on your own. But that's kind of, I guess you'd say that's kind of my 2 cents on what the drama is all about. I can't give you specifics. You got to go elsewhere for that, because I don't really know all the specifics. So unfortunately, I can't be any more helpful than that. And I've probably already said too much, but Marcus, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, are you familiar with Matt Dillahunty? Obviously. Who isn't, right? Says, if so, what is your opinion on his approach to speaking with apologists? Well, I think he's a little ham-fisted myself. I do think he's great. You know, he was one of the reasons why I do what I do. He was one of my influences. That being said, man, I think he can communicate better. I would love for him to be able to keep his cool sometimes. But listen, sometimes they need cooked. Sometimes you get people up there and you're like, this person needs to get cooked. And if someone's going to do it, it's going to be Matt. Matt will cook somebody. So I love Matt. I think he has a great place in the world. And I love his voice in the community, even if he's doing things that aren't the way I would do things. And Satcom, thank you so much for the $10 super thanks. I appreciate that. And Fierce Interaction, my friend, good to see you tonight. Thank you for the $20 super chat. So glad to catch you, even if late. You've inspired me to pick up a study Bible and to learn more about this infernal book. Maybe one based on the NRSV. Would you recommend one? So the study Bible that's based on the NRSV that I prefer is the New Oxford Annotated Bible. You can also pick up a copy of the Westminster Study Bible. That's a good one. And you may also want to look at the SBL Study Bible, all of them in the NRSV. The SBL Study Bible is in the NRSV Updated Edition, and the Westminster might be in the Updated Edition as well, since it was released in 2024. So those are good options. You may also want to consider the Catholic Study Bible 3rd edition. That will be the NABRE, an amazing translation, amazing study Bible. In fact, I would say my top 2 study Bibles are the NRSV, NRSV 5th edition for the New Oxford Annotated Study Bible, and then the second favorite is the Catholic Study Bible. That is currently in the 3rd edition. It's a great study Bible. And Snipe says, 44-year-old here. I was an atheist for 40 years. Thanks for doing something that hasn't been widely done in thousands of years, standing up for sanity. I do what I can, Snipes. I really, that's the goal. I want a better, saner, normal world to live in. And so I'm going to fight to that end. We're just a couple more super chats, friends. Gymnasty says, oops, sorry, I got a double super chat. You clearly have never been in situations where men's robes are removed in a hot frenzy while enjoying a romantic evening in a garden. I don't think I've been in that situation. I can't say that was a thing. I've never been disrobed in a garden, but it sounds like something from mythology. It'd be a fun read for sure. And Rock Hard for Doug, good to see you tonight, friend. Thank you so much for the super chat. Says, whenever look at the trees is referenced, I just want to say, look at the mountains. Praise Doug and Sharon Stone. Let's go, Justin. That's such a good point. I cannot wait. I've been talking about it and I've still never done it. I cannot wait to give the argument, look at the trees, but for Doug, and just see what Christians do with it. It should be hilarious. All right, let's grab Alex from our queue. How you doing, Alex?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, hey. So I know the discussion is to prove God, but I kind of wanted to ask if I can kind of twist it a little bit, and instead of saying prove God, say prove why a person should believe in God.
Well, I'm not sure that's meaningful to me. I mean, it might be meaningful to you. I mean, there are probably some decent reasons to believe in a God if you imagine the right God. Why would I want to believe in something that's clearly not true? And then if I'm going to believe in things that are clearly not true, why would I draw the line at God? Why wouldn't I believe in all kinds of things that aren't true?
So my argument is that if we were to believe in a God, there would only be one God worth of believing in. Because let's say that there's 5 gods that you could believe in. One God is going to require you to go to war with other people in order to get something out of him. And then another God, I guess to simplify it, there can only be one God where morality would matter. So any other type of God would not be worth believing in.
Right, but I'm saying if I'm just going to make up things to believe in, why would I stop at God? Why don't I just make up all kinds of things that I don't believe in, as long as they serve a purpose?
I mean, you could, but like for example, a unicorn, right? You could make up that unicorns might exist, but ultimately, it wouldn't really serve your life any purpose.
It would,
like believing in a unicorn. Well, I mean, that's fine then.
Right.
But
so, like, if we're just saying that we should believe in things if they provide some kind of a mental or emotional benefit for us, like there's no limit to what I would, I could make up.
So, because like in what form that God is, I'm not necessarily arguing with that. Because that God could be in a unicorn if that's what makes you comfortable, I guess.
No, I'm saying in addition to God. Like I'm saying, let me pretend that there is a God that exists, or 10 gods. Who knows? Why can't there also be a unicorn that travels around that grants people a conscience, not consciousness, but a conscience? Like let your conscience be your guide. Why shouldn't I believe in the moral God-giving unicorn?
Well, I mean, if you make up other things to believe in, then at least to me personally, it's fine, just as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. Sure. But like for example, if you said you must believe in this unicorn that I believe in, then that's where it becomes the issue.
What if I said if you don't believe in my unicorn, you'll burn in hell?
Yeah, see, that's where it becomes an issue, because if a God is moral, then, well, when I say moral, I actually don't even want to use the word moral. I want to use the word good, because there's only one kind of God that could be good, and that is the God that is merciful and loving. Because
I don't think hell is merciful or loving.
Well, yeah, see, that's the thing, is I don't necessarily believe in Christianity or Abrahamic religions. I think
I'm misjudged. Sorry, I assumed you did.
I think the Abrahamic religions were trying to interpret God, but ultimately they're all human beings. And I think actually the Garden of Eden is a story about how people started making subjective morality. So, and that's the real issue, because from there they went to different tribes, and then you end up with Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and that's all because of the Garden of Eden.
Do you believe in a specific God?
Like for a specific religion, you mean?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because I mean, I think all of the religions are trying to interpret the same God, but differently.
So,
Like, for
what does
example, if
God
I
do
look at
for
a
you?
painting, well, see, I want to argue that at the end of the day, either God exists or he doesn't. And so, like, think of
Well,
it this way.
but that's not the argument you're suggesting. You're saying it doesn't matter if he exists; we should believe in him anyways.
Well, see, my argument is that we should believe in him because there's a 50% chance that he exists.
I don't think it's.
But it might
50%.
be a he. It might not be a he. It could be whatever. But well, what I really mean is that at the end of the day, maybe not 50-50, but at the end of the day, 50-50 in the sense of either a God doesn't exist or it does. And if a God doesn't exist, then nothing matters. You can just do whatever you want. But if a God does exist, and let's say you go out and beat up a lot of old ladies or something, then you'll have to answer for that.
I don't think so. Why does God existing mean that you have to answer for beating up an old lady?
If God was good, I mean.
Yeah, but why would I assume that God is good? I think with the evidence we have of the world around us, we would assume that God is not good. In fact, that he's evil.
Well, if God is not good, then nothing matters, because even if human beings try to make a moral system, nobody has to obey it. Like someone could just say, "Hey, I'm going to get together a lot of people, and we're just going to conquer everything, and whoever doesn't agree with it, we're just going to kill them," and there would be no issue with that.
No, there would be an issue with it.
So,
people who do that nonsense now get put away, right? So in society, you don't have to follow the rules, but if you don't follow the rules, we're going to deal with you. That's how societies work.
but let's say that a large group of people got together and they overpowered everyone else. Because, I mean, obviously this has been happening throughout history, right? Where a large group of people get together and they say, my beliefs are correct and your beliefs are wrong. And so we are going to go in there and basically kill you, and no one stops it.
Yeah,
so, I mean, what is stopping them from keep doing that?
They do stop it. That's how wars work. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
But I mean, ultimately, what I mean, though, is that the wars still happen. So like,
what?
Well, there's still death.
That's evidence that there's no God.
Well, so because like you're saying that God must not be good because
man
of, like,
behaves
suffering,
as
right?
though there is no God. So you're suggesting that there must be a God, otherwise there's no punishment for bad behavior. There is no punishment for bad behavior. We know that.
Well, actually, I'm not saying must. I'm saying there might be.
Well, I don't think there is.
But here, let me give you this scenario. Like, what? But again, I'm arguing for a good God, not like a God that judges you because you're gay or something.
Why are you arguing for a good God? Why would I believe that there is a good God as opposed to an evil God?
Well, it's like I was saying, if there's an evil God or if there was no God, then nothing's really going to ever get better because there's no one there to prevent people from killing each other, for example.
Well, God's not preventing people from killing each other now.
Yeah, but what I mean is, well, because there's a thing of like, you can let people do something for a certain amount of time because ultimately it's not that big of a deal to you because there's going to be some kind of like final judgment or something like that.
Yeah, so you're just saying the reason why God allows the chaos is eventually because he's going to, judge everybody in the end. But by making that argument, you're actually ceding that your first argument is false, which is that the reason why we need God to exist is because, he prevents us from doing all the bad shit. When I tell you all the bad shit we're doing, you're like, well, yeah, but he's going to fix it in the end, which means that the need for God doesn't really seem to be there.
Well, I'm kind of saying they go kind of hand in hand in the sense that a better way to explain it is not necessarily that God stops it during this life in this realm, but that God is like the gatekeeper to the next life type thing. So
Yeah.
he doesn't stop it here. But like, let's say that you killed all of your life and then you go to judgment, then you would not go to the next life.
Well, why would we believe that there's another life?
Well, like I was saying, it's more of like an insurance aspect. So,
So you're
for
just saying that it's
example,
better to believe in a God that's going to punish you in the afterlife because it might deter some people's behavior. Is that what you're getting at?
only if that God is good in the sense of merciful and loving.
No, because if he's merciful and loving, then you don't get the punishment in the afterlife. That's the opposite of what you get. So the
Well,
God that you're thinking of isn't all that sensible. In fact, you might
let me give you an
readily
example.
believe in a God that just reincarnates you instead of punishes you. Why would reincarnation not be the
Well, I mean, that's
logical
fine.
step instead of punishment?
Well, I mean, that is a form of punishment in a sense, but the word punishment,
Sure.
I guess, is a loose word. But I mean,
Why
the
would
God
this
could do that.
God create the earth with hurricanes and tornadoes and volcanoes?
Well, I mean, I could give you ideas as to why, but ultimately that wouldn't really determine, because that's kind of like saying, why do parents exist? Because, kids could technically just, evolve on their own in theory.
That
But,
has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Does your God
oh,
create
yeah.
things?
In a sense,
Did he create
but,
the earth?
well, because a part of me doesn't really want to go down this road just
But did he create the earth?
I'm not sure.
You're not.
I mean, and I would assume so.
Is your God a god, or is he a super evolved demigod?
Well, whether it's a demigod or a god or anything like that, that's not my main point.
Well, I think you're missing my point. You're defining a god that you want to be punishing people or being a curtailment for people's sin, but then like when it comes to looking at what he actually did, like namely create the earth and humankind and all that nonsense, all of a sudden you don't want to look at that God because it seems like that God is kind of like contradicting what you think of the all good God. Like you think that God necessarily must be good, but God can't necessarily be good if he created this earth, which is full of all of the unnecessary suffering.
Well, I mean, like a lot of people argue that, because that's the thing, I can come up with tons of arguments, and I know one argument is that it's more of like a test to see how people will behave.
Is God
because
all-knowing?
I think God is maybe all-knowing in the sense of he knows the past and he knows the present, but he doesn't know the future.
What is God testing you for when an earthquake hits and a building collapses on top of you?
To see if you will still be a good person to others, or if you will start like scrounging stuff and like killing other people.
No, you're dead. The building collapsed on you.
Well, like you were saying, it's possible that there's like things like reincarnation. So
what's the test? If he's just killing you with a falling building, what's the test for?
Well, he wouldn't be testing you per se, but he would testing the people that survive.
Okay. And how does brutally murdering their loved ones count as a test?
Well, because ultimately, like, if you're concerned about the eternal life, then like one specific life isn't that big of a deal. Like to a person, it might seem like that big of a deal, but
yeah, I would say
if you're dealing in the terms of like everlasting life, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, so if you believe in reincarnation, then in fact, you have even less of a deterrent for committing crimes because you're like, well, it's okay. I'll whatever my next life is. I'll just.
I would think that God's intelligent too. I mean, if you know you're constantly doing that, then
if he created natural disasters.
Well, I mean that's all debatable, but
what do babies learn when they're born with bone cancer?
Well, that's another thing too, is like maybe God is not absolutely perfect. Because
So your God is not the creator of all things. He's probably not all knowing. Now he's not all perfect. At some point, you probably just have to admit that your God is like fanciful. It's just something you dreamed up in your head, because you
no, it's
like
just
the
that
comforting
things
idea
can have
of
limits.
having an afterlife.
Well, it's just that things can have limits. I mean, it doesn't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to be he's either all bad or all good. Like if you think about it mathematically, maybe it is better to, because I ultimately think that probably God has to deal in duality. So he can't make everything perfect, because if everything was perfect, then nothing would exist.
I disagree.
Because that would be mathematically zero.
That's not what perfect means. Perfect just means complete,
Well,
without lacking anything. So like mathematical zero,
well, if everything was
nothing
complete,
to do with perfection.
Well, if everything was perfect, like what do you mean by perfect?
I mean not lacking anything. Zero is the definition of lack. It's complete lack. It means
okay. So then in that case, the number one,
nothing.
Everything would have to be the number one.
Well, no, number one is just the number one. But listen, this conversation is getting a little bit long in the tooth and isn't actually going to be going anywhere, and it isn't actually compelling as a conversation. So I'm gonna move on to the next caller. But thanks for coming up.
Okay.
Cheers. Well, he was nice at least. All right, let me grab some super chats, so we'll keep on rolling. And rock hard for Doug. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate that, friend. It says, also, I'm pretty sure in the book of Doug, I think Joshua something, it says trees grow on mountains, except they can't reach the summit. So trees do actually grow on mountains, and we do need to really get to the book of Doug and make this reality. We need to publish a book of Doug. It started in the Discord. We just haven't really filled it out. Make the best of what's around says the film Zeitgeist is helped me deconstruct. Interesting. I've not actually seen it. I don't really do conspiracy theories, but it probably is interesting. Zeitgeist probably brings up some decent points at least. I read that one already. Matt, thank you so much for this $20 super chat. Says, isn't it problematic for the Jesus was God theory that Jesus didn't appear to know that the major stories that... Oh, yeah, sorry, we did do that one. I apologize. I'm sorry, guys. I'm getting crazy backed up and lost in these super chats. Johanna says, my logical mind just can't wrap itself around the Trinity. What drug were these guys on when they came up with that baloney? See, that it's like necessity is the mother of invention. I suspect that people were recognizing that like Christianity is polytheism, and they're like, fuck, we gotta invent something. And so they're like, well, it's not polytheism, Jesus is God. Oh, of course. Okay, sure he is. Explain to how he's God. Well, there's this thing called a Trinity. It's nonsensical. That's how I envision it. Boogit says, DZ streaming on my 26th. Hell yeah, stay great. Well, thank you. And today's the 28th? What? Oh, 26th birthday, maybe. Boogit, if it's your birthday, happy birthday. Big W. Thanks for being here on your birthday. And Minuteman, thank you for the super chat. Says, I think this caller's agenda is to bash... Oh, agenda, I see what you did there. Is to bash gender identities. That's adorable. Praise Doug. Doug will not stand for it. He'll sit for it because he's a rock, but he's rock hard for all genders and all gender expressions. And Johanna, thank you for the super chat again. Says this asshole should talk to Forrest Valkai. Kill this call. Yeah, I love Forrest when he handles these topics. He's the expert. And Maddie says, "Whoa, didn't see that coming." I did. I'm a prophet. I kind of saw that coming. I've talked to that goofball before, and he's an idiot. But thank you for the super chat. And Aaron, good to see you tonight, fellow dragon. Thank you so much for sending out 10 DZ gifted memberships. Big W. Really appreciate that, friend. And Brian, thank you so much for the super chat. So no need to, I'm going to read it anyways. No need to read. Just admired how you handled the bigot. Big respect. Well, thank you, Brian, for supporting the channel. I really appreciate the support. And Marduk is with us tonight. Good to see you, Marduk. And great new updated picture. I appreciate that. $10 super chat. And keep on trucking, friend. Great to hear from you. His Shadow says the racist caller obsessed with gender was so far in the closet, he was in Narnia. Actually, that's actually most likely the case. He probably was. I think so. And Johanna says, all these theists ever talk about is God the Father and our Lord. I guess they don't have enough brain cells to give any credit to a female force like Mother Nature. Listen, if there's a God, you can't convince me it's not a female. It's got to be. The maker of all life, it makes perfect sense. I'm with you. And Adele, thank you so much, Adele, for the $20 super chat. Big W, friend. And good to see you again here tonight. It says officially on vacation with Rock Hard for the rest of the weekend. Hell yeah. I hope you're getting some good vacation time in. It says ask the Discord chat when it was too soon to crack the Kraken, and they said I was already late. A few of these callers, and I definitely poured the rum. Listen, I don't blame you. I'm surprised I'm not in the Kraken, but unfortunately I've got to work. But listen, this coming weekend, I'm going to be doing some Kraken pours with you. And Johanna says, no theist would have a personal experience with God or Jesus if they never been indoctrinated by religion. And I agree. They only think they're having experiences. They're not. We know the truth. And Johanna says, Doug is a rolling stone who gathers no moss, meaning no bullshit attaches itself to him. And obviously, that is the case. Doug never collects moss, ever. Because he's rolling. He's moving. He's rock hard. He's rocking and rolling, friends. And Carlos, thank you so much for the super chat. Big W says, hey, Justin, so today only Coke. Kraken on weekend. Salute. Unfortunately, I can't do any Kraken tonight. I've got to wake up early for work. And, life being what life is, unfortunately, you have to play by the rules sometimes. And Johanna says, God didn't create good and evil. How can he? He doesn't exist. Some people are born with a scrambled brain, rotten apples, and factory rejects. You're not wrong. Some people are born with less capacity. That is the case, actually. And the ungoogleable man, good to see you tonight. Thank you for the 666, friend. He says, ever since I heard about Doug, I've been seeing rocks everywhere. Gravel driveway, Walmart parking lots, gardens. Coincidence? It's not a coincidence. Your eyes have been opened to Doug. Doug is now in your heart. So you're going to see Doug in everything. And Johanna says, the first of the 7 rules of life is let it go. Religious beliefs should be the first to let go of. I agree. Couldn't agree more. You don't need it. They don't serve a purpose. They don't help you. They don't get you anywhere. Thank you for that sentiment. And PJ, good to see you, friend. Thank you for the super chat tonight. It says, would you mind giving a quick rundown of the extent of the Old Testament rejection? For example, I've been told the 10 Commandments don't apply anymore. Yeah, that's crazy. And unfortunately, it depends on who you ask. Now, according to the New Testament, it's just theoretically the dietary laws until you get to Paul. In the book of Acts, the dietary laws are poo-pooed. Peter, in Acts chapter 10, gets the vision of the sheet coming down with the clean and unclean animals. And God declares that these unclean foods are now clean for you to eat. Paul takes it a step further and says all of the law has been done away with. All of its decrees, all of its requirements have been done away with. So according to Paul, you don't have to follow anything in the law. But Paul, unfortunately, has to backtrack on that on several occasions and say, well, you don't have to follow the law anymore. But if you do these sins, X, Y, and Z, then you'll go to hell. So Paul himself can't quite figure it out. And the lists of sins that will land you in hell are various. Seems to be just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall. Jesus didn't say that. Jesus said to follow the law, Matthew 5:17 through 19. And Cher's oldest daughter, great name, says, God said he created good and evil, so evil is good. Yeah, if God is all good, for sure. Yeah, in fact, Isaiah 45:7 says that he creates the light and the darkness, both peace and calamity, or the peace and evil. Ra in Hebrew just means calamity or evil or badness. Marduk again coming in. Thank you for that. It says, did you watch Hadassah on Joel's Live? Not the second time, only the first time. I need to get around to it. I haven't got around to it, but I'm going to get to it, Marduk. I heard it was another epic crash out. And Johanna coming in again. Thank you, Johanna. Says fake news, all of it. How about the Bible, Mr. Trump? The God's honest truth. I've read it cover to cover, especially 2 Corinthians. Every time I hear Trump say 2 Corinthians, it makes me chuckle. He's not the only one that does it. I've heard it before, but it's crazy. And Sci-Fi says, I know Doug is real because I had to pay him $5 to notice me, a true prophet. That is a good play on words, Sci-Fi. And Doug always notices you. He really does. He notices you extra, though, when you send super chats. Big W, though. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I think there's our last one from Johanna. Johanna says, only men can think without God's moral code. Everyone would be out killing, raping, and pillaging. Women are here to be the voice of reason. Can we have some respect, please? You'll get it from me, Johanna. You will get the respect that you deserve from me. Women make the world go round. We wouldn't be here without our mothers, and things would be much better off if we actually had some balance in our power. And we're able to, we're able to have half of our brain trust in action. And I think that's our last super chat. Maybe we got one more in the other queue. Fierce Interaction coming in with another one. Thank you. Says, thanks for the study Bible recommendation. Just ordered the New Oxford annotated with Apocrypha NRSV. Praise Doug. And of course, Justin, looking forward to having no time to read it. Well, I'm in the same boat quite often, but we're going to read it bit by bit as much as we can, although I've been through it. But big W on ordering the study Bible. You're going to love it. Make sure to order tabs and tab it up. And last one from Soot. Soot says, the more you learn about science, the more you learn our existence is a true natural miracle in this sprawl of hostile space. Embrace that instead. It's truly more incredible than anything we've made. I disagree. I don't think it's a miracle. I think it's just the laws of physics, and we're all going to be wiped out and annihilated in one day anyways. But I get it. I understand that when you look at like the birth, or you look at the majestic mountains, you are filled with awe and you think, what a miraculous thing that we're all here. You know what I mean? I get that. I just wouldn't call it a miracle. And listen, friends, it's late. I got to get offline. Thank you so much for all the likes and the shares and the gifts and support. And thank you, Big Daddy and Bertram and Parker and Londro for the gifts on TikTok, and Bad Religion and Ashley and Preston, Astronova, Justine, Algorithm, Andrea, Anna, Red Shoes, Whiskey Punch, Lisa's with us as well. Thank you so much for all the likes and the shares and the support. And I really appreciate you guys supporting the work. I know today was kind of a weird day. We had some slow-moving guests, and the live started late, and but we should be back on track. We should have a longer live stream on Friday night, and then we'll adjust later this week, Sunday, to a summer schedule. We'll talk more about that Sunday. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go to bed, and I really appreciate you guys. Thank you, moderators, for being here moderating. Couldn't do it without you. And we'll see you again in a couple nights on